In 2023, they had the incredible honor of being invited by Christine Anderson and the European Parliament to Brussels, where they gave a presentation in the European Parliament. The presentations from this summit went viral and have had billions of views. In November 2023, the ICS was warmly received in the Palace of Parliament in Bucharest, Romania, a country that knows all too well what it means to fight for their rights and for their freedom. This led to ICS 5, which took place at the Conservative Political Action Convention in Washington, D.C. Critical information was being shared, and we were finally presented on a mainstream international platform, which garnered even more attention. A number of the experts that were in Washington also had the opportunity to do a presentation to the United States Senate and testify about their knowledge of what went on. And I'll tell you, standing in the United States Senate was quite an experience. So the next ICS is being hosted in Tokyo, Japan, and they're going to be sharing the information they have with the Japanese audience, the Japanese parliament, scientists, experts, and the Japanese public. ICS is trying to offer a platform to discuss strategies moving forward and has changed its name to the International Crisis Summit because, while COVID still needs to be solved, the terrible things that were done, people need to answer for them. We have bigger threats coming. We've got the central bank digital currencies, digital convergence, the social credit system. All of this stuff is coming. So ICS is now building up to prepare to defend against that. Despite censorship, punishment, and many obstacles, the ICS team has been relentless in their pursuit of truth and freedom. We're hoping these historic events have triggered global conversations, but we're also encouraging people around the world to ask the hard questions and to find the warriors within themselves. On behalf of Lily and Robert, the founders of ICS, I would like to thank again the PPC Party for inviting us here. And to Maxime Barnier, we wish you the best of luck. And together we will continue to fight for truth, rights, and freedoms. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. We do apologize. We had a video, but we're running into a couple technical difficulties. Dave, if they want to learn more about your organization, what's the website again?
Yeah, right. I don't think I have that right in front of me. Come to the booth and see me, because I don't have the website right in front of me. I can't remember if they changed places yet.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. So on the cards at the booth. So please see Dave. Great organization. I think it's very important the work they're doing, and certainly we're proud to have them here at Revision 2024. All this weekend, we've been talking about how to get involved in politics, specifically at the federal level. Now we're hearing a little bit about different organizations that are fighting for our freedoms, that are standing up for the values that we want to espouse. There's one guy here today who has actually walked the walk, not just talked the talk, and he has been involved quite a bit at the local level. Quite often people say, why is there no PPC at the provincial level? Why is there no PPC at the local level? And quite often, what we find is many of these issues, they don't start off in the federal arena. Justin Trudeau didn't just wake up one day and decide, we're gonna go after all of these people. These ideas, this woke mind virus has been percolating, has been rising up in politics for many, many decades. And quite often it starts in the most insidious ways possible. It'll start in your local school, your teachers indoctrinating your students. It'll start with your local municipal council, councillors who want to show that they're doing something, painting trans flags as a sidewalk or as a crosswalk. And so today we have with us a very special guest who has actually gotten elected to a local municipality. Mr. Dave Brunell is from a municipality here in Ontario, the township of Tiny. He's a real freedom fighter. He knows what it takes to get elected. Please give a warm revision welcome to Mr. Dave Brunell.
Thank you very much, everybody. I just want to start by thanking the People's Party of Canada for inviting me to speak. And I also want to thank all the speakers yesterday and this morning so far. I learned so much and been inspired. As it was mentioned, I'm a member of council for the municipality of Township of Tiny, Ontario, about 30 minutes north of Barrie. I'm sixth generation from the area. I'm bilingual, Métis, and also a graduate from Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo, Ontario. I majored in economics. My connection with the PPC party and my political career started in the fall of 2020. I felt what was going on in the early stages of the pandemic was politically motivated. So I went on a fact-finding mission. I noticed the federal political party, the PPC, and its leader, Maxime Bernier, was showing opposition to the mandates. And after reading the platforms, I liked what I saw. So I met with the local candidate, Stephen Mack, then with Maxime Bernier in person, one-on-one for about 30 minutes in a home in Barrie before a rally in downtown Barrie. Became a co-campaign manager for Stephen for the 2021 federal election. After the election, I found out about a provincial party that went against the mandates and fighting for freedom. So I became a campaign manager for the local candidate for the 2022 provincial election campaign. And then, during that time, the trucker convoy. So on Monday, I had no intention of going, but people kept on saying, Dave, are you going to Ottawa? Are you going to Ottawa? It's like, well, I didn't think it was going to be a big deal, so I didn't make plans to go. By Wednesday, things, you hear so much about the news, what was going on, it's like, okay, and then made a decision, I guess I'm going to Ottawa, I guess. But on Friday, four of us went to North Bay, because the truck convoy was coming from out west. And that alone was inspirational. I'll never forget this one family, young family with two young children, and the boy, people were lined up along the streets, and behind the wave of people, this one boy was holding onto a poster in the 30 degrees and just holding up the sign. It's just, how can it not affect you? Like you see this and it's like, okay, I'm doing it for them. I'm going to Ottawa. So I went to the trucker convoy. And it was the most patriotic event I've ever been in my life. We came through Renfrew, I think it is, we were just ahead of the convoy. And there was 19 overpasses full of people on the way to Ottawa. We're not a fringe minority, sorry. It was unbelievable, unbelievable. So shortly after that provincial election, and with a great support from my wife, I decided to run at the municipal level. My dad was on council for Township of Tiny for 7 years in the late 70s, early 80s, and again a neighboring council in the year 2000s for another 7 years. So I had a pretty good understanding of municipal politics and kept in touch with local municipal affairs. So I decided to run for a position of councillor. There were 10 candidates for 3 positions. I did not do any door-to-door canvassing, nor any paid advertising, and no affiliation to special interest groups. Maxim taught me that. I focused on a mail-out flyer, meet and greets, and all candidate debates, and I came in a solid third. After 3 campaigns trying to become elected, that night when the news came in that everybody was celebrating, and I'm thinking, oh, I got in. I was fighting to get there, but now I'm here. Wow, what do I do now? So once elected, it was like a honeymoon. Like the residents were happy. We were called the Unity Council because as we seemed unified on most decisions. But I quickly found out that like most residents of Tiny, I was becoming increasingly frustrated with our current government's fiscal irresponsibility, lack of integrity, disregard for accountability to constituents, and government policies driven by unelected bureaucrats, lobbyists, and special interest groups. Same stuff that's happening at the federal level and provincial level, happening at the local level. I believe in a balanced approach to decision-making based on evidence-based, critical thinking analysis, and consultation with constituents and key stakeholders. Since government policy affects all residents, public servants have a responsibility to their citizens to develop policies in a fair and transparent manner without compromising the rights of the individual. All residents of any community deserve more than backroom deals and unsustainable debt levels that will lead to high taxes and diminish opportunities for years to come. So, global influence at a local level. Nathan touched on this, and because I'm in government now, I see it now, and I'm also part of other groups that are giving me this information. I'm noticing now the level of involvement of the United Nations in our municipality and surrounding areas. So while on the fact-finding mission, I found out how the UN was influencing local governments. I came across this document called the Municipal Primer on the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development, created in 1994, 30 years ago. Who knows about this? It's unbelievable. This document is designed to provide municipalities with information and practical guidance on how they may contribute the effective implementation of Canada of agreements reached at the United Nations Conference on Environment and Development. The primer explores various strategic actions that may be taken to promote sustainable development at the community level. It states on page 2, achieving sustainable development will mean difficult changes. The peoples of developed nations will have to change their lifestyles and aggressively pursue policies that promote energy efficiency, resource conservation, and cleanup of damaged environments. On page 36 of this document, there's an excerpt that says, Vision Principles for New Regional Plan provides a framework for understanding the range of elements which contribute to sustainability in communities. It is defined by 6 elements. One of them is government, private sector, and community partnerships. Nowhere is it more clearly visible than in the range of Western governments, including Canada and the US, that have adapted the strategy of public-private partnerships as their vision for the global future. When this merging of the state and the private sector contrive to pursue a single narrative, they'll use their combined power to eradicate or obscure all other narratives. We saw an example of this public-private alliance during the enactment of the Emergencies Act, where banks willingly froze the accounts of citizens the government considered enemies. And most recently, we sit with a Liberal NDP coalition establishing a national dental plan, forcing dental practitioners to partner with government. So the municipal primer led to another document, and ICLEI, and I'll get to that some other time. Because what I want to finish with is the call to action, getting involved. How can we get involved at the local level? First, you can join a local resident ratepayers association group on your local level. If one doesn't exist, start one. Because the local governments do not want to hear too much from the residents. It's clear. It was a Druthers article last month talked about that, where they're trying to go here and trying to silence the public. So what these ratepayers and associations can do now is host their own town halls. Invite the council to come. And you don't have to wait for the local government to create town halls. You can create your own town halls. We did that one in Aurelia, and it drew some controversy. There was a hit piece on me on the local paper, but it's okay. 2, volunteer at community events. The community does a lot of events. They're always looking for volunteers. 3, participate in town councils and school board meetings. View previous council meetings. Find out which council members align with your values and principles and support that council member. Make deputations, delegations, and basically those are a presentation to discuss issues and concerns in your community. 4, get involved in committees. Most municipalities are always looking for committee members. I believe most are every 2 years are looking for new members. So please get involved with committees. Run for school board trustee, and also run for council. I want to end with this. I want to finish with a quote from John Diefenbaker. I'm a Canadian, free to speak without fear, free to worship in my own way, free to stand for what I think right, free to oppose what I believe wrong, or free to choose who shall govern my country. This heritage of freedom I pledge to uphold for myself and all mankind. The time to speak up is now. Our silence on these matters will one day testify against us. We can do no other. Keep strong and free. Thank you.
It's amazing. Thank you so much. I'll describe those. Thanks again, Councillor Dave Brunell from the Township of Tiny in Ontario. One more round of applause. You know, we're all about getting candidates elected. Here we have a guy who's got elected, and he sees it for himself. That's what we wanted to do this weekend, to connect, to be together, face to face, in the flesh, person to person, having these conversations. In my mind, there is no substitute for being together, person to person. Yes, we have Zoom, we have Skype, we have phone calls, we have all this amazing technology, but at the end of the day, politics is a person-to-person business. It's all about winning hearts and minds and bringing people in. And thank you, Dave, for the great work that you're doing. We have another gentleman here today. How many people have heard of the Midway Project? Can I get a show of hands? This is a fantastic organization that has existed. It actually predates me here in the PPC. And there was one gentleman who stood up and actually put it together. He wasn't directed to, Max didn't phone him up, there was no big committee that had to be put together. This was just one guy who said, you know what, I want to get involved in the PPC, I want to do my part, I want to do what I can to help motivate and encourage our candidates, provide a forum for them to stay connected, to share their best practices, to share their ideas. And that man is Mr. William Brown from the Midway Project. William, are you here? You're here. There we go. Please welcome William from the Midway Project. Do we have William's video ready?
Prices are high. Crime is on the rise. And our leaders have lost their way again. But there is something more. There is more uncertainty. There is more anger. There is more division. We seem to have lost those common ties that once bound us with respect and affection. We have lost that sense of trust. For many, so much has changed so quickly that they haven't been able to keep up. So they turn to the media for an explanation, and they call on experts for a solution. And things just keep getting worse. We have plenty of history from around the world that shows what happens when trusted leaders choose rulership that plunges their nations into darkness and leaves their people to fight over the scraps that remain. But now, more than any other time, we are able to study the calamities of the past and understand its progression. And for the first time, we can prepare to stop it. People are waking up to a new reality that they've been trying to avoid. And as life gets tougher and tougher, more and more people are starting to look for better ideas. We need to be there when they do. Others have already begun. People are standing their ground on ethical principles and a sense of duty that they have for others. From pundits to presidents, from professors to parents, people are speaking up. Whether they do it with a billboard and a smile, or they do it together by the thousands, their uplifted voices carried alongside the trumpets of truckloads. Maxime Brunell loves Canada, and he believes that the people have the right and the ability to take the lead in their own country if the need arises. So he started the PPC to provide that opportunity, then put out a call to Canadians to stand beside his candidates, and Canadians answered that call. People from across the country put their names beside his and ran with passion. Volunteers and supporters joined the cause, and PPC found a way to support Canadians wherever they could. But although passion may bring people to their feet, passion alone isn't quite enough to get people moving. People need something to believe in, and it's ever harder when they've been let down so often. Speak so that they can hear you. We can show Canadians that we're able to unite Canada by uniting the efforts of the People's Party. We can learn how to be there for them by being there for each other. We may be ordinary people in an extraordinary time, but history chooses its heroes not from the mighty, but from the determined. We can overcome our limitations together, and we can mentor others with the strengths we already have. Come and be a part of the tide that rises all ships. Join with each other on the Midway Project.
How is everybody? I'm having a great time. I hope you're having a great time. We haven't done this for a long time, and it's so refreshing to get back in front of everybody. Now, they've only given me 10 minutes, and that video took 3.5. Now, if anybody who's actually been on the Midway Project, that's asking me a lot to wrap it up. Ask anybody. Like I see the laughs, they know. But I'm going to do my best. I think I'm going to do it. So what the Midway Project does is we provide a place where candidates and people trying to actually develop things can come on and learn how to do it better. Learn the skill set of learning how to speak, learning how to craft a message, learning how to actually do events, considering things like backdrops and microphones and lighting and everything, and learning the skills of connecting with people, of bringing them together. That's harder than it sounds. You know, I began with the very beginning of the PPC. When Max formed his own party, that was very unique. And it wasn't just that he started a party, but he started with 4 principles. And I thought that was a very unique thing, and it spoke to me individually. And then I reached out, like any reasonable, mature person, I went right to Twitter. And in that conversation, I found a candidate, and he's looking for some help, so I became a campaign manager. And from there, I met a bunch of other really great people that were trying to run as well, and they were all having the same problems. So instead of having 12 different conversations, we got on Zoom and started doing it together. But then that developed into something a little bit more formal, because politics is a contact sport that has very specific skills required, and it takes time to bebuild. Just when waiting for the writ to get dropped to do like a by-election, it's hard to get that traction. Being a candidate, it's like building a friendship. It takes time to build. Showing up out of the blue and asking for someone to be your best friend is a bit of an ask. But when we begin to start working together and start to speak in unison as a party from coast to coast, people get a chance to get to know who we are by what we are standing for. And our goal is to bring Canadians together, not conservative Canadians, not liberal Canadians, but just Canadians. And I think that's something that everybody's pretty hungry for right now, because people have been divided by every metric possible right now, and they're tired of it. And when all we offer them, not just us, but anybody, is more problems to go on top of the problems that they're already having, they check out. But I think if we can start bringing our own party together, those principles will translate in our conversations to the average person. Not because we have problems to be concerned with, but we still have a great Canada, because great Canadians are still here. But they've been told to be silent. They've been told that their ideas are wrong. They've been told, sit down, shut up, we'll take care of it from here. But we have the ability to say, that's not how things are. Start talking to each other, come talk to me. So when you guys start going to do your events, I always tell the people on the Midway Project, when you start doing your events, one of the primary things you have to get out there is drive the people to each other. I don't know who goes to church, but one of the things they do in church is during the service is say, okay, turn around and say hi to the person next to you, shake their hands, pray for them. What we often do is we'll just get up, we'll give a speech, and people are excited to be in the room, they're talking to each other, and then, good night, thanks for showing up, and then they go back to their lives again where they don't have a lot of people up with them anymore. And they miss out on that moment, and people won't do anything you don't tell them to do. They don't know what they're doing yet. So when they do come to your events, hand out pencils and paper. Ask them, please, take a moment right now. Reach out to the person next to you. And I say this to you guys as well. If you don't know someone, get your business cards, get their contacts. Don't miss out on this moment to go home with a bunch of new friends, people you can share ideas with. There's a whole lot more I can say, but I think what I've said matters the most. And please, come up to my booth if you have any further questions. I want to make a room for all of you to come on and start learning and growing together. I think our key is if we can bring ourselves together, it'll be an example for the rest of Canada. And that example, like the trucker convoy, could be an example for the rest of the world fighting the same fight that we're fighting. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, William, and thank you for all the great work you do. If you haven't had a chance to connect with the Midway Project, please find William here at the conference. Please connect online. Great, invaluable resource for candidates and people who are maybe thinking about becoming a candidate. Colton Waller, many of you know him. He's the creative director here at PPC headquarters, and he's been a member of the movement since the party first began in 2018. He ran as a PPC candidate in its first election in 2019 in the riding of Kitchener-Conestoga, and at the time he was the youngest federal candidate in the country. Colton joined the party staff in 2020, and in this time he has spearheaded marketing and creative strategies for the PPC, including our branding and logo redesign in 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm revision welcome to Mr. Colton Waller.
Good morning, everybody. I just want to thank everybody. I know that you had a really busy day yesterday, and today's a little full as well, so thanks for hanging in there. With that in mind, this is going to be a really quick segment. So we're just going to go briefly over the PPC brand. Branding is fundamentally the foundation of marketing, and Canadians certainly know the value of marketing. The idea is to sell our ideas, so to speak, to the Canadian public. And in order to do that, you need to have a strong and consistent brand. Everybody is familiar with the color purple. That's our main color. The shade that you see up at the top is our main shade of purple. We have two additional shades to add some depth and complexity to your designs. We have also recently added green as an accent color, and you've seen it prominently displayed in the branding for this conference. Going forward, green will be part of our design kit, and in the coming months, we will provide more information on a comprehensive branding refresh in advance of the general election. For our logos, there are 3 different versions. We have what we call the acronym logo, PPC, and then we have 2 versions with the name written out. One with the name written out underneath the logo, and one to the side. And the reason why it's done this way is to give you a little more flexibility when putting the logo on your designs. There are basically 3 different ways that the logo can appear. White on purple, purple on white, and black on white. Black on white should only be used in cases where you might be doing some at-home printing, like on a LaserJet. If you have the opportunity, always go for color. And of course, if you're making something for the internet, always use color as well. You'll see underneath the 3 logos here, there are some examples of improper use of the logo. Using other colors, squashing the logo, outlining it, throwing a backdrop or glow behind it, tilting it, or even using the old 2019 logo, that all goes against the branding guidelines. We have two fonts that we use in our branding. The first one is Railway. That's our main typeface. It's an open source font, which means that it's free, it doesn't cost anything to use. It comes with various different weights, which means how thick the text is. And you can see 3 examples up on the screen. There are more than that, but it's just to illustrate what it looks like. You should always use Railway as much as possible. Any headings or prominent text on any PPC literature or content should use Railway. We have a second font, Cabin. Think of it as a companion accent font. You can use this for subheadings or body text, and this is another open source font. So really that's it. That's a very brisk rundown of the PPC brand. So I'd just like to take a few minutes to explain why we need to have a strong and consistent brand. The reason for it is because during elections, which is when most people tune into the political landscape, it's very chaotic and overwhelming. Other political parties, like the Liberals and Conservatives, have been around forever. Everybody knows who they are. They know that the Liberals are red and they have the L. The Conservatives are blue and they have the C. We're not at that stage yet. The PPC is a very young political party, and people don't immediately think of our name when they see the color purple. We want to get there eventually one day, and in order to do that, we need to align with the branding guidelines. The other reason why it's important to align with the branding guidelines is because it allows flexibility and adaptability in different situations. Let's just take voter contact as an example. It can happen under many different contexts. You may be talking to somebody on their doorstep. You may be having a conversation with somebody online. And if you're a candidate, your volunteers will be speaking on your behalf. If everybody's got the same correct shade of purple, the correct display of the logo, nothing's out of place, then the voting public can begin to associate these design elements with our ideas. And that's the whole point, is to form an emotional connections with the vision and values of the PPC, which is smart populism. So that's basically it. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Colton, and thank you for all the hard work you've done helping us to develop a brand. As Colton said, our brand is kind of our outward face. We want to make sure we're putting our best face forward. Nothing looks more unprofessional than when you grab the wrong logo. I've seen people use kind of the first version we had from when the party was founded 6 years ago. Or worse, they'll take it and stretch it out or pixelate it. We want to look professional. We want to look like we are a potential government in waiting, that we can actually take the reins and help get this country back on track, and certainly branding and having a professional presence and appearance, much like we have this weekend, is very, very important. There's another important group I want to draw your attention to. I'm sure you've seen many of our young people here at this conference. They helped out with the registration table. They have a booth here in the vendor's room. These are young people who have stepped up. They've said, you know what, I don't like this country that I'm about to inherit. What can I do to get involved? There's 2 individuals I want to welcome to the stage today. The first is Christian Poach. He's the president of the New Generation PPC, or New Gen, and that's the youth wing of the People's Party of Canada. He's an honors political science student at Wilfrid University, and Christian's been passionate about politics and activism from a young age. He first got involved in activism during 2020 through helping to organize major protests across southern Ontario against the COVID mandates, and he gained notoriety for his involvement with the Oakville-Trafalgar High School controversy, which gained international coverage from outlets such as Fox News, True North, the Toronto Sun, the Toronto Star, and Rebel News, and a bunch more. A dedicated PPC supporter since 2021, Christian helped establish the foundation of the New Generation PPC in 2022 to help unite young Canadians under the banner of the PPC and mobilize them to spread the party message. Haley Smith is a young professional of 20 years old and she's been a youth member of the PPC since February of this year, so very, very new, but again, she's put her hand up. She's also an inaugural national executive member of New Generation PPC, and she currently serves as the vice president of New Gen PPC. Haley's been instrumental in helping both with recruitment and other efforts that the youth have been involved with ever since she assumed her position. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm revision welcome to Christian Poach and Haley from New Generation PPC.
Serving this role since the spring of 2022, and the same time when I started volunteering for the PPC, and I'm here at where I'm from, in the city of Toronto. And I'd like to say, since the inception of the New Generation PPC, when it was first brought up as a local initiative, in a span of a short time, it has now expanded into a vibrant national organization, and this is one thing I'm very, very proud of. And I'm also very honored as well to be recognized for the volunteer recognition. Thank you very much for the recognition. And we all believe in the PPC, that with the common sense policy, it will bring Canada back to where it was prosperous. Thank you.
Hi all, it's an honor to be here to speak to you guys about New Generation. Today we are breaking up our presentation into two different parts, so I will be doing the 5 W's, and Christian will be explaining how New Generation PPC can collaborate with EDAs to help promote our party brand. So we understand that many PPC members or even some EDAs may not be aware of who we are. So as such, I will go on to explain about who we are, what we do, when we started, where we are, and why we do it. So firstly, who are we? We are New Generation PPC, the youth wing of the People's Party of Canada. We represent all PPC members between 14 to 25, and any PPC members under this age range are automatically a part of New Generation PPC by default. This is why it is very important for us to know which of the current PPC members fall between these age ranges so that we can help get them engaged and involved within the organization. So, what is New Generation PPC? What do we do? You can think of New Generation PPC like a minor league for any potential major leagues. We are a place where young Canadians who wish to get politically involved can have that experience of the political process for the first time. It is a place for young members to develop their political knowledge and skill set to prepare for greater political involvement in the future if they choose to do so. New Generation PPC also serves as a place for fellow members to discuss, collaborate, and socialize with their peers. However, our primary job is to unite as many young Canadians as possible under the banner of the PPC. We promote and advocate policies that are in line with the party platform, but more specifically that resonate with the younger generation. We do this because we believe that we have an understanding how other youths talk, the way they think, and the issues which concern them the most. New Gen also has another very important role, which is to closely work with EDAs in HQ to assist them on any relevant party efforts. This can be through events such as attending a local EDA event, or attending this very conference, or most importantly, assisting in any general electoral efforts. Now, where do we exist? So we have New Generation PPC members all over the nation, from far west in Vancouver to far east in Newfoundland. However, at this moment, a majority of our members are based in Ontario, but we are seeing a solid growth in membership in the Western region. As each of the different regions have different issues, we strongly believe that a person who lives in their region would know best about the current issues affecting the people in their area. This is the reason why New Gen PPC has 4 regional teams alongside our national executive team. The 4 regions are based off the structure when the PPC introduced the 4 regional lieutenants. We have a Western Regional, an Ontario Regional, Quebec Regional, and an Atlantic Regional. The Western Regional consists of Nunavut, the Territories, BC, and the Prairie Provinces, while the Atlantic Regional consists of the Maritime Provinces. Currently, we do have a full Ontario Regional Executive Team, a growing operational Western Regional Team, and our Atlantic and Quebec Regional teams are continuing to be built. Our National Executive Team consists of 7 voting members who reside in 3 different regions. So simply put, we are well represented with different regions across this country. The concept of New Gen PPC was first brought up in spring of 2022. At that time, it actually began as a regional initiative, and then less than a year later, in early 2023, we had enough youth who were looking to be a part of the New Gen PPC. So with this development, the initiative was actually elevated to a national level initiative. We were able to have our inaugural national executive team assembled soon after, and officially they took their roles May 1st, 2023. During our inaugural year, we saw the growth of our organization in terms of membership, volunteers, and aspiring members who wish to take up a leadership role. We were able to form the Ontario Regional Executive Team during our inaugural year, and we were able to build our organization professionally with the hard work of our leadership team. We were able to have a provisional structure entrenched in our first AGM held in Niagara Falls in March of 2024. And now we come to the most important part, the why. Because we know that some of you may ask yourself, why does the New Generation PPC exist? It's simple. It's about creating a platform to resonate with a very important base within the PPC, the youth. In fact, since the inception of New Gen PPC, the youth demographic has consistently pooled at 10% or above in major pools. We also believe that many youth have previously felt intimidated or disconnected to get engaged in politics. At the EDA level, we see a lot of the older generation highly engaged and driven to help the PPC. Their knowledge and life experience is a valuable asset to help the party's efforts. To the young members, the lack of experience and generational gap may lead to many who are too intimidated to be engaged. This is where New Generation PPC comes in play. We help remove the barrier of intimidation by reaching out to them as their peer. This is how we believe we can best connect with other youth, by leveraging our commonalities, such as school experiences, current struggles, similar interests, fads or trends, all with the eventual goal to recruit and mobilize young Canadians. Now, to delve further into how New Generation PPC can effectively and efficiently collaborate with local EDAs and HQ, I'll turn over to Christian to further elaborate. Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, Haley. My name is Christian Posey, and I'm president of New Generation PPC. And over the past year and a half, I've had the honor and the privilege of leading New Generation and building a team of dedicated young Canadians and growing this organization beyond my wildest dreams. So what can we, HQ and EDAs, do collectively to collaborate with one another in order to ensure that we are able to grow and capture upon this rising popularity that we see amongst young Canadians? One of the most important things in our view is that we want to help HQ develop a social media strategy to harness the power of social media by creating engaging, relatable content that resonates with our younger audience. Specifically by producing memes and short-form content for platforms such as Instagram and specifically TikTok. Now, I know some people in this room might be a little hesitant about the idea of using TikTok for various reasons, but we assure you this is an extremely powerful tool. As across the pond in Britain, I would say our British counterpart, Reform UK, beat the Labour Party on a per-video engagement basis by 30%, and the Tories by more than double in the period between May and June of 2024 before the British national elections. And they also spent nearly $0 doing so. How did they do that? Simple. They posted relevant, trending memes and a lot of content of Nigel Farage doing normal things like sitting down at a table and talking about policy matters for a moment, or doing things like simply having a pint at the local club. They are making content that is organic, authentic, and relevant, unlike the corporate, uninspiring, mass-produced media that Labour and the Conservatives were publishing. In other terms, TikTok is a true gold mine, and we should treat it as such. New Generation is also adamant in establishing correspondence with as many EDAs as possible. This is so that we can put young volunteers in connection with their local EDAs, if they are not already, and have EDAs connect us with any young supporters we are not aware of. We would also be happy to promote local EDA events on our X and our Instagram pages. Just send us a message with the details, and we will be happy to do so. We are also welcome to the idea of co-hosting events with EDAs in order to reduce cost. A great example being our first AGM, which was held in Niagara Falls in correspondence with the Niagara Regional EDA and the candidate Peter Taras. Thank you for that. I know you're here, thank you. Shout out to you, Peter. And to those in the room that live in a riding with a major university or college, this is an important thing to write down, campus clubs are on our radar. We do have a university presence at multiple universities across the nation, specifically U of T, Carleton, Brock, Ryerson. We also have a presence at the University of Montreal and at some smaller colleges like the Ontario Technical College in Durham, Ontario. However, at the current moment, unless an unusual circumstance prevents itself, we tend to take a more community-oriented approach with the development of local associations where we find that there are significant demographics or concentrations of young Canadians present. This helps us to get supporters in touch with one another and not alienate any of our younger supporters between the ages of 14 and 17 years. And it also helps us to assess where we have a significant concentration of support. So if we have something maybe in Toronto, for example, and it happens to be around a university, we can use that data in order to help maybe establish something down the line at University of Toronto, whether it be the St. George campus or at the Scarborough campus or the one in Mississauga. Also, if you've ever had a young man or woman come to you asking for your help in creating a club, please put them in touch with us. The process to apply for an official campus club can be quite complicated in some instances. It is an annual process where, generally speaking, 10 to 25 student signatures are required, along with the minutes of an AGM meeting to be held in which a president and a CFO must be elected. The campus club constitution must also be written prior to the creation of the group and sent to the representatives at the school, either usually a student union or some sort of academic body. Ultimately, however, this process is fully within the hands of the university administration or the student union. We recently had an experience with this at Concordia University, where the creation of the PPC club was shot down due to the student union believing that we were some sort of far-right political organization. But ultimately, in turn, when it gets closer to the election period, that is absolutely something that we would love to advance in collaboration with EDAs and HQ. So that is all that we have for now. If anyone has any further questions or suggestions to us, we are around and we are happy to talk to you. If you see any of us, come on up and say hi. Once again, thank you very much for this opportunity, and we look forward to working with you in the future to gain electoral victory. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Real quick, for our viewers online, you have a new website?
We do, actually. We just published our new website. It's newgenppc.ca. If you go on there, you can find all of our information. If you're a young person watching right now and you'd like to help out and volunteer, we have a volunteer form you can fill out, and we will assess that accordingly. And also on there, we have our social medias. You can look at our Twitter, our Instagram, our TikToks, respectively. And yeah, that's our website, and that's where you can find us and contact us. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Big round of applause for these guys. Young people stepping up to make our country a better place. You know, I actually came up through youth politics when I was a wee speck of a lad. And back then, I was with the Progressive Conservative Party of Ontario. We actually had two youth wings. We had the Campus Association, and then we had the Ontario PC Youth Association. And the reason was simple. They wanted to provide opportunities for young people. In fact, more opportunities in my mind are better, which is why I could not believe that there are federal parties out there. The Conservative Party of Canada does not have a youth wing. They do not see value in training youth, the future of this country for tomorrow. That's what differentiates us here at the PPC. We believe in the youth. We believe they should have a voice. We want to give them as many opportunities as possible. And if you know any young people, maybe you're involved in a local association and there's a student in your neighborhood, somebody who's come around, please put them in touch with New Gen. If you're here at the conference today, they do have a pamphlet as well and some other marketing materials. So feel free to stop by their booth and pick all of this up. We have another great vendor here today. I don't know if anybody saw this book, Fissman's Fraud, The Rise of Canadian Hate Science. When pseudoscience, politics, and fraud converge, what lengths will ideologically or financially driven researchers and politicians go to impose their will upon others? Throughout the pandemic, we've witnessed a slide from objective clinical research to easily manipulated real-world studies to purely fictional simulations completely detached from reality. Consensus, or groupthink, quickly replaced scientific scrutiny and civil discourse plummeted. It became difficult to discern scientific recommendations from political talking points. On April 25th, 2022, a very dangerous line was crossed. Leaders in the Canadian research and medical community started rubber stamping a clearly fraudulent study and its overreaching purpose to use science to justify discrimination, sow hatred, and interpret the notion of inalienable rights. Within hours of the study's official publication, dozens of articles in top national papers flooded Canada, warning of the dire risk of merely hanging out with unvaccinated people. Selfish souls who refused to accept the new genetic COVID-19 vaccines and the unvaccinated, in quotes, were compared to carriers of syphilis, intoxicated drivers, and reckless individuals who had no regard for others. It was unbelievable how they really tried to demonize us. Can't get an operation? Blame the unvaccinated. The science says so, but did it? This book here is going to examine in the man, the politics, and the intent behind the faux study, how researchers concocted results to override reality and scapegoat the unvaccinated. The establishment's willingness to go along with the fraud and how political ideology fed into the analysis. How the research is being used to swindle Canadians out of their Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This is an investigative look into Fissman's precedented-setting hate science. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm revision welcome to author Regina Wattiel.
Thank you, Nathan. So my name is Regina Wattiel, and I had the privilege for running as the PPC candidate for Ottawa Centre in the last federal election. Like all of you, I was concerned about the direction that the country was headed, especially in regards to the vaccine mandates and passports. Not only did I regard these measures as being deeply unethical, I knew them to be unscientific and to carry considerable risk. And in the summer of 2021, they were coming for our children. So I jumped into the race. Before 2021, I would never have imagined running in politics. But then again, I would never have imagined our elected officials so brazenly betraying all the core values of Canada. I'm a little nervous. Thank you. Thank you. So, the only party to fight for the rights and freedoms of all Canadians was the PPC. And the only leader to put everything on the line, including his own freedom, was Maxime Bernier. So you have my deepest appreciation and gratitude. Thank you so much. Now, since the election, I have spent my time fighting the scientific fraud that propped up these harmful measures. Without scientists willing to betray and deceive the population, this pandemic scam would not have been possible. Now, I do have a background in science, including a PhD in statistics, so I do feel equipped to fight this battle. This is especially so since pandemic science has been all about the manipulation of statistics and bogus modeling to prop up or to push a political agenda. Now, when Trudeau began his campaign of hate back in 2021, it was already known at that time that the vaccines did not stop transmission. Israel, the first country to vaccinate the majority of its population, was already seeing a resurgence. They had already approved their third dose, and they were warning other countries that 2 doses would not be enough. We are already hearing a lot of reports of massive outbreaks amongst mostly vaccinated venues, including Massachusetts. Following the Independence Day celebration, they had an outbreak of almost 500 people. 74% of them were vaccinated. And months before that, in May of 2021, the breakthrough cases had become the norm, so much so that the CDC stopped counting them. And at that time, it was acknowledged the vaccine mandates were unconstitutional. Trudeau himself even said that Canada was not a country that mandated vaccines. Yet at that very same time, his government had already secured 400 million doses of vaccines. That was enough for 10 doses for every man, woman, and child in the country. Now, we all know that Trudeau is not good in math. He has told us he has problems adding simple numbers like 13 plus 14. But he did know how to read the polls. And Canada at the time had spent a lot of time, money, and resources polling Canadians. Canada actually led the way in implementing the World Health Organization's Behavioral Insights tool. And what this tool did, this tool was a survey, and it allowed the government to test its messaging, to monitor the changing attitudes of Canadians, and to gauge the threshold of government abuse that Canadians would tolerate. And by the time the election was called, we were already on our 15th cycle. And the polls were saying that most Canadians would go along with vaccine mandates. So the Trudeau government saw vaccine mandates as a political winner, an opportunity that they just could not pass up. So they made vaccine mandates a wedge issue. They pit the vaccinated majority against the unvaccinated minority, and they told Canadians to follow the science. But the only science that they were following was behavioral science. So they dialed up the hate speech against the unvaccinated. So they dialed up the hate speech against the unvaccinated, and they blamed them for pretty much everything. The unvaccinated weren't only wrong for not taking this new genetic vaccine, they were also misogynists, racists, anti-science, anti-vaxxers who put everyone else at risk. And then Trudeau, he threatened our jobs. He threatened our freedoms, and he threatened our friendships. And he asked and he encouraged others to do the same. Now, in the midst of all this, we had the English language leaders debate. And that was a debate that Maxime was not allowed to participate in. And in the moments before this debate, the other leaders got together in a room, and they stood 6 feet apart from each other. And in unison, they all chanted, "We're all in this together. We're all in this together. We're all in this together." It was eerie. And then they created a 1-minute video where they encouraged everyone in Canada to get vaccinated regardless of their risk. Now, the pandemic was a psyop, and the Conservative leader, Aaron O'Toole, played into it. And when he said they were all in it together, I think that's when he lost the election. Trudeau would be re-elected, the vaccine mandates and passports would come to pass. And the Trudeau Liberals, along with the provincial premiers, what they did was they created an identifiable group, they vilified that group, and they did everything in their power to punish that group. The Liberals worked with the provincial premiers, and they paid to convert our freedoms into privileges. Universities and hospitals were given large financial incentives to combat so-called vaccine hesitancy. And they were encouraged to bring in their own mandates. So our children, if they wanted a proper education, and if our athletes wanted to play sports, well, then they'd have to accept the risks of this experimental concoction. And at that time, it was already known that there are large safety signals, including myocarditis and pericarditis, especially for our youth, especially for young men. Now, if you compare that to what we were told when they were first rolling out these vaccines in the spring, remember that, at that time, they had locked us down again for the 3rd time, and they told us that vaccination was our way out. At that time, Trudeau also mentioned that if Canadians achieved a 70% vaccination rate, we would be freer. We would see a return to normalcy. But when we hit that target, they actually did the opposite. They took our freedom away, and they replaced our freedom with privileges conditional on obedience. Can I keep going? So science was manipulated, facts were twisted, the unvaccinated were purged from many workplaces, they were banned from travel, they were banned from public venues, and they were disinvited from many social gatherings. But then with all these discriminatory practices in place, boom, Omicron hit. And with 80% of the population vaccinated, rates surged to record heights, 5 times previous peaks. Hospitalizations doubled. And the interesting thing is, that was Christmas in 2021. 6 months before that, Theresa Tam had come out and said that if we received an 80% vaccination rate, then we could avoid another wave. So she couldn't have been more wrong. But did they admit they were wrong? No. Did they admit the complete failure of these vaccines to curtail transmission? No. Instead, they doubled down on their rhetoric against the unvaccinated. Well, I didn't actually get to my book. But it does get into what happened at this point. We go through the Omicron wave. I'll just give you a couple of minutes. Is that okay? We go through the Omicron wave. What happened from that? We had the convoy. From that, there was a period of desperation, and Trudeau needed the science to back him up. And this is where I would get into my book, but I took too long, so I apologize. But what happened is, Trudeau needed the science to back up his mandates, and in comes Fisman. Fisman and his researchers from the University of Toronto. See, during the Omicron wave, it was the vaccinated that dominated the cases, and they had higher incident rates than the unvaccinated. So Fisman and his colleagues came in, flipped reality, and basically simulated data that flipped reality and showed it was the unvaccinated that had higher rates. He passed that off as a true reflection of reality, and this was used by our government to continue with the vaccine mandates and passports. So I apologize for not getting to that sooner, but I'm practicing. Anyway, I very much appreciate being a vendor here at this wonderful event, and if anybody wants to speak to me about my book and what I'm working on, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you. And for those of our viewers online, where can they find this book?
The book is sold at Amazon, so thank you. And also, I think Indigo chapters, so online.
All the major bookstores. Ladies and gentlemen, one more round of applause, please, for Regina Whittiel. It's a must-read book. This is a story that needs to continue to be told. I'm sorry we don't have longer with her. I think we could probably spend like an afternoon revising and talking about what happened. And it's important that we tell these stories so that these things don't happen again. Those who fail to learn from history will make the same mistakes. And the powers that be have gotten away with it once. What's to stop them from doing it again? Our last and final partner is one I was really excited about to meet. How many have seen or heard of Action for Canada? You saw the booth here? Well, we're very fortunate here to have Tanya Gaw. She is a committed Christian and defender of faith, family, and freedom. She's the founder of Action for Canada, which is a grassroots, not-for-profit organization committed to upholding the Canadian Constitution and the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. She began her journey in political activism in 2015 in response to the government passing legislation that severely impacted Canadian democracy and freedom. Tanya's been working to give the silent majority a voice through letter-writing campaigns, petitions, and public gatherings. Action for Canada not only educates people on what is happening, they effectively equip, encourage, and mobilize Canadians to take action. It's right there in the name. Tanya's greatest mission is to declare that Canada is founded on Judeo-Christian biblical principles, forming our laws and values, and provide a system of governance that sets us apart from the totalitarian, extremist, and communist regimes. And because of it, we have the freedom to believe, or not to believe, but we have that freedom without fear of persecution, oppression, or in some cases, even death. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm revision welcome to Tanya Gaw and Action for Canada.
Thank you, Nathan. All right, thank you so much. It's been an awesome weekend. I've enjoyed the speakers. I want to give a special shout out because we know Maxime is the pretty face to the PBC, but Evie and Nathan and Adrian and Martin, you guys and all the team have done such an amazing job. It's hard work putting this together. So thank you. And I am just so impressed with the youth that came up here. I particularly find that very exciting because you'll see that Action for Canada is also reaching out to the youth because they are our future. And the Marxists know it, so we better pick up on that and be working very hard to reach them. And so I always start my meetings to undo the enemy taking ground. And so I thank God and God alone for the ground that I'm standing on. And I love it because you're going to learn that we do delegations with our chapters across the nation. This is what Action for Canada looks like nationwide. We have 100 chapters and growing. And what we're doing is we're trying to complement a party like the PPC who is doing the groundbreaking as well. And I met Maxime in 2018. I consider him a partner in all of this and an ally, and it's incredibly important. When the Conservative Party, many years ago, I started my journey in 2015, and my first letter to my local MP was about the legalization of recreational marijuana and putting it in the hands of 12-year-olds. I had a problem with that, and I thought most Canadians were, and I thought that my MP, this, like I say, brand new at this, happened to be Liberal, and it was Ken Hardy. Later on, I kind of reported him because I believe he's a communist infiltrator, and that these are things that we, learn and understand how terribly serious the situation is in Canada. And so that began my journey, and from there I went to addressing Bill C-16, known as the Bathroom Bill, allowing biological men into women and children's private spaces, motion M103, the Islamophobia motion, and as well Bill 75, many of you may not know about, which lessened offenses against sex offenders. So this has been incremental, the attack against our children, against the natural family, against society at large, and they've been at it for decades, as mentioned. In 2019, I started doing call to action campaigns back in 2015 and 16, and started with 12 people on my email list, no social media, and just kept going at it. So it shows you what one person can do, and every candidate that's running for the PPC, never get discouraged. It takes time and takes effort, and we are so much farther ahead than we were in 2015. So be encouraged and do not give up. And so I made it to 500 people on my email list, and I was excited about that. And then I started to do petitions. And I was talking about Andrew Scheer and the legalization of marijuana, but I'll also address the Global Compact on Migration. And I created a petition for the marijuana, it was 45,000 signatures. And then 3 days for the UN Global Compact on Migration, Andrew Scheer would say nothing. But every time the petition was signed, an email would go to the Conservative Party, and it had 11,000 signatures in 3 days. And all of a sudden, he popped his head up and started speaking about it at the 11th hour in November, right before December, when Trudeau was going to be signing this document. But make no mistake, Stephen Harper was signing on to the Sustainable Development Goals prior to that. So they have not been friends of Canadians for quite a long time. And so we started out as a grassroots movement, but we've moved way beyond that. We are a national organization having quite an impact, and we are lobbying government at all levels. And in the last election, back 2 years ago, it'll be this fall, a number of our members and chapter leaders got elected as school board trustees. One of those, thank you. One of those school board trustees in a Catholic school district just managed to get the pride flags banned. And so there is a lot that we're doing from the inside. Okay, I'm going to just go to my screen for a minute, and I'm going to try to do this as rapidly as I can. I always want to remind people to join Action for Canada, get our weekly emails, because we're not just reporting the news and scaring the bejeebers out of everybody. We have a strategy of war. And getting into the communities at the local level and having all of our chapter leaders build the community, and then they're going in and lobbying government. You would be amazed at how many elected officials, whether MLAs, MPPs, name it, that actually don't know what's going on. They're sort of signing on the dotted line or going along with the party, and they're ignorant, maybe lazy, or uninterested or involved. And so our teams go in, and if there's willingness for a conversation, we have a conversation that expands. If they are in on it, then we are applying pressure, and we are making it public. And these are important things to do, and together with the PPC, talking loudly out about these issues, we are changing the conversation in politics at all levels. You can see that Pierre Poilievre is now in a position where he has to start moving the conversation over to what's important to us and what's critical to all Canadians. And my uncle, who recently passed away, was like a dad to me, but he'd always say, the squeaky wheel gets the attention. That's how the LGBTQ sex activists did that. That's how the Muslims are doing it. They're pushing an agenda, pushing an agenda. Well, guess what? We're still the majority. And we better remember that, because we're fighting for our country. So as Action for Canada grew, all of a sudden I took all those emails from the petitions and I bumped up to 58,000 people on an email list in 2020. But in 2019, I officially registered as a not-for-profit organization, and we just keep growing, and we're educating, equipping, and mobilizing Canadians, and we're doing it effectively. I've written reports back in 2015 about the failure of multiculturalism worldwide. If the host country's values aren't being embraced, it was actually an act of treason when multiculturalism was included, because the long-term goal, as you can see, was to destabilize Canada. And it is against our Constitution. It should have never been included in the Charter, and it needs to be revoked. It is the door for all of the extremists. Thank you. Sorry, I want to keep going because I know that the time is short, but it is the door, that door that the extremists are using to come over and take over our nation. And how foolish are we to say that, you know what, anybody and everybody, and to name these as religions. Okay, we are a nation built on Christian principles, which means we need to follow those. Whether you're an atheist or not, you need to understand, would you rather live in the 56 Islamic majority countries, North Korea, China, Pakistan? They're all living under different so-called faith systems, which becomes their political systems, and they're all living under oppression. That is why they're going after the West. That is why they're trying to destabilize us. That is why they're flooding us. It's not mass immigration. It's an invasion that we're facing right now. And if these nations I just named don't have to become multicultural, if I as a white Christian woman can't go to one of the Islamic nations and sit in office, why are we so foolish to allow them to come in and infiltrate our government and push their agenda here? We have a right to say, no, we're too nice. And we need some major changes. I'll just skip this. This is very important in 2019 when I was appealing to God, like, do you really want me? I'm, addressing all of these very serious issues between 2015 and 19 when I was going to take this step against the Islamization of Canada, against the LGBTQ, and we couldn't speak as freely as we could now, but I was out there doing it anyways. And so when I finished praying and saying, God, are you sure you want me to do this? I opened up Jeremiah 17 to 19, and he said, literally, get up and prepare for action. Go out and tell them everything I tell you to say. Do not be afraid of them, or I will make you look foolish in front of them. For today, I've made you strong like a fortified city that cannot be captured, like an iron pillar or a bronze wall. You will be against the whole land, the kings, officials, priests, and people of Judah. They will fight you, but they will fail, for I am with you and I will take care of you, says the Lord. And I am out there ferociously speaking on these taboo issues until the truth is finally the truth again. And we are taking back territory and ground. The Constitution says in the Charter, whereas Canada is founded on principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. That's only one God that's considered in Canada, not the false gods that have infiltrated our nation. We need to shut those down. UN Global Compact, I mentioned that we were working on those. I'm going to fly through these links so you get just a little. I'm not following Professor David Haskell today, okay? You're getting a fire hose of information. Okay, so Canadian systemic racism, I wrote a report. I'm not sure. Oh, here we go. It's not truth and reconciliation, it's truth and revelation, and they're using the natives in order to take away land rights and push the global agenda. I'm outing it all, the billions of dollars Canadians are paying so that they can take over all of our land and our resources. They are using the natives as a pawn. I care more about the natives in Canada than the Liberal government ever will. Please go to my report. I am exposing not only the foreign interference, but human smuggling. We have met with top Israeli officials, and they have agreed that they would not be permitting Palestinians to come to Canada from Israel. Otherwise, we have seen, if you think that the Palestinians that have risen up around the world was coincidence, you're mistaken. They were sleeping cells ready for such a time as this. They've infiltrated all nations in the West in order to do this, and they want us to pull on our sympathies, but they need to go to the Arab nations where they can enjoy the climate, the culture, and the things that they naturally would. Then we go through to just other reports on terrorism and the plan of them to enter our miserable house from within and take over. These are what the schools look like. The Islamic schools in just Ontario were fools to be allowing and permitting this to happen. We are dealing with the, I've got a petition to stop mass immigration as well. Sorry, it's a little bit, I would talk about the COVID-19. When that came out, we were on the front line Our notices of liability kept 45,000 teachers and school staff working in British Columbia without being put on unpaid leave. And so what I'll do is, these links will go very fast, Nathan. We had a huge win in Saskatchewan where literally Action for Canada lobbied the government for 4 months, serving notices of liability and information, and we managed to stop SOGI 123 from being implemented in Saskatchewan, as well as getting Planned Parenthood banned. And so then we're working with the resources that we have. We have flyers that we go to the schools. It's a truth bomb against the Win Sex Ed or SOGI 123. Our teams are actually going to schools and handing these to the parents. That's important. We're doing the 15-minute cities. We have flyers for that as well. We have delegations going out to mayors and city councils. We've had a huge win working with Tom Harris here in Ottawa. We're doing a huge battle in Manitoba right now. It is important. We've said that if candidates are running, please sign up and be part of Action for Canada, because when we run people, you will be able to debate anybody under the table, any of your opponents. We are reaching out to youth, and we have youth events. We are reaching out to parents and supporting them. We are having marriage courses to strengthen the family. Everything that Action for Canada is doing is like a machine. We are going into churches when we set up a chapter. The churches are opening their door for our communities to meet, and then we're building the communities, and guess what? Nobody can shut down the church anymore. They stay open. We don't have to rent a hall, and it's been an amazing partnership with the churches. We're seeing a mass exodus from the school systems, and if we're doing that, we need a solution, which is homeschooling. And so we're helping, and the churches are working together with us. So I'll end it there, Nathan, because I know we're short for time, but I really encourage the candidates to join Action for Canada. We'll do anything that we can to help to educate you, to help prepare you. I know the People's Party is doing a good job of that as well. But our materials and resources are all there for you to navigate through. We've got videos and special speakers on every single page. Just from time to time, stop and watch one, and you'll be amazed at what you learn. Okay, thank you. God bless you all.
Thank you so much. Wow. Isn't she full of energy and life, ladies and gentlemen? This is what we need. People who are going to step up and be bold in their convictions. You know, we put out this flyer on mass immigration, and I want to just highlight one point here. It says politicians who support mass immigration are at fault, not the immigrants they exploit. And that's very, very important. There's a difference between calling out the problem and demonizing an individual and group of people. But at the end of the day, as Tanya has rightfully pointed out, we have many different facets in this society. The left has tried to pit us against each other, divide us based on a number of different factors. They did it with COVID. They did it with race and gender theory. They're doing it with the environmental movement. These are all religions of sorts. And in the absence of a, quote, religion, which is what they like to say, in the absence of a culture, as the Liberals like to say, the left likes to pretend, we don't have a culture, that we don't have a value system, that we weren't founded on any principles, that somehow Canada just came to be. It dropped out of the sky with no direction whatsoever. And we know that's a lie. We're bold. We are proud here at the People's Party to stand up for traditional Canadian values, and certainly people like Tanya are a big part of that movement. Please find her if you haven't had a chance. If you're watching online, you can go to Action for Canada online, and please connect. We need more people like this. And with that, we do have a quick break, very, very quick, about 15 minutes. If you want to go grab a coffee, run to the washroom. We'll be back at 11 o'clock. You don't want to miss this guy. Billboard Chris is coming up next live on Revision 2024. shortly. If there's anyone in the hall, I think this is going to be one of the main speeches of today. I think you're going to love our next speaker. A reminder to our candidates and anybody else who wants to be part of the documentary we're making about revision. This is going to be a great piece of promotional material for the party. Please find our film crew. They are filming today. We brought them back for a second day, but only for a couple of hours. So please don't delay. We want to get you as part of that video, particularly if you're a candidate. Please take your seats. We're going to begin our next session. I've got a video that's kind of an intro video. Yes, did you want them to play that? Video? Yeah, right away. Do a little intro, they play that. Yeah, I'll intro then. I'll let them know. Why? Yeah. Did you guys lower it? Okay, we're going to start with our next speaker. I know many of you got a taste of him last night at the fireside chat over dinner. For those who are watching online, we've had some amazing speakers here this weekend. Wish you could be here in person, but we still have a few more speakers we want to get to before this weekend's over. Chris Elston, better known as Billboard Chris, has become an internationally renowned activist for parental rights and works tirelessly to expose the harmful impacts of radical gender ideology on children. Chris wears sandwich boards in every city where he goes on 3 continents, bearing simple phrases that wouldn't have been controversial a decade ago. Phrases like, children cannot consent, to puberty blockers. He's become a one-man army against gender ideology, and his activism has inspired thousands around the globe. The country's foremost expert on communicating issues around gender ideology. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm revision welcome to Billboard Chris Elston.
My name is Chris Elston, known as Billboard Chris, and I'm traveling in the country, literally hanging out on street corners and going to busy events, going to wherever the people are, just have conversations about gender ideology, mainly medical harm that is coming to kids when they want to switch their sex. Because we have children who are being indoctrinated either in school or primarily on social media as well, to believe that it is stereotypes that determine their sex or their gender. So overwhelmingly, it is supportive. At least I would say 9 out of 10 people support what I'm doing. People know instinctively this is wrong. We should be letting children grow up because it's not stereotypes that define who they are. If a child is gender non-conforming, we should just encourage that. That's fine. You don't need pharmaceutical drugs, cross-sex hormones, and surgeries to find your true inner self. But people understand this. People are supportive. It's just most of the supportive people are quiet. I'm just going to keep traveling the country and keep having these conversations because I know eventually we win this battle. It's just a question of how much damage is done to children before that happens. Thank you. That video was shot in Charlottetown, Prince Edward Island by a gentleman who I'd never met before. He just came out to see me that day and hung out with me for about an hour, and then 2 weeks later sent me that video, which I love because it sums up what I do perfectly. Are we getting feedback here? Yeah. We're fixing that. All right, that's better. So one of the beautiful things about this, I have this expression, good things happen when you go outside. And it's true, because wherever I go, people who I've never met before come around. I might meet new media, I might help to activate other parents to get involved in this fight. But really, the bigger message is that when you put yourself out there, great things will happen, because people will come into your orbit who also want to cure some of these problems in our society, and pretty soon you'll have a team around you. And though it looks like I'm by myself a lot of the time when I'm out there, I'm really not. There are millions of people now around the globe supporting me. I've helped to activate hundreds of thousands to take on this role, and sometimes all I do is help to give other people a boost, and it's beautiful to see what's happening today, where this is now the #1 cultural issue on the conservative airwaves, certainly every day. But parents are up in arms, as they should be, because there's no such thing as a transgender child. They're called girls and boys. And the positive message we should be sending is that they're beautiful just as they are. This ideology, and we're going to get into the basics of this ideology, there's nothing to it. It's all based on lies, and it's honestly the most abusive thing you can tell a child. The left, the radical left, I don't want to lump them all in, but for purposes of this talk today, I'm just going to say the left, because this is pushed by the left. They want us to believe that it's somehow loving and kind to tell a child that they were supposed to be something they're not. That's the message of gender ideology. They literally tell these children that they were born in the wrong body. What does that mean? Nobody can tell me. I've had tens of thousands of conversations in the real world, on the street, and I've asked this question thousands of times. Nobody knows. They can't define any of these terms. They can't tell you what a gender identity is. They can't tell you what it means for a girl to be a boy. And if you do get any sort of answer out of them, it will be something like, well, you know, girls like nail polish and long hair and the color pink. And so I'll say to them, okay, so if a boy likes nail polish, does that make him a girl? Of course not. They all know that. These are the people who say stereotypes are bad, yet they have this blind spot where they don't see they're pushing stereotypes to such a degree that they're advising children now have their puberty blocked, be given the wrong hormones that don't belong in their body in those amounts, and cut body parts off. They're doing double mastectomies on children as young as 12. It's happened. Erin Kimberly, a nurse in British Columbia, who is a self-described trans man who used to work for Trans Health BC, reported just a couple months ago that a 12-year-old had a double mastectomy. Their breasts aren't even formed. Partially. They're babies. These kids believed in Santa Claus yesterday. And I'll get into who these kids are, what type of children are showing up to these gender clinics in a minute. But let's get into the basics of gender ideology. So about me, first of all, I started my campaign in September of 2020 with a big, beautiful billboard. I was in Vancouver on Hastings Street heading into downtown Vancouver. I drove around the streets one day for about 3 hours trying to find a location because the sales guy, whose name conveniently was Thomas Tran, couldn't find me a location. But I found this sign. It used to be one of those ones that rotates, and it had just become a static billboard that doesn't change its face. And so it wasn't even in their sales system yet. It was a great location. This was during COVID. I got a COVID special, and I paid for it for 3 months with an option to extend, and it lasted 1 day. It got paint bombed overnight, and then a Vancouver politician named Sarah Kirby-Young said it was hate speech, and they took it down. I was ready for that, and I leveraged all the outrage online into a quick little fundraising campaign, and a week later had the same billboard up in San Francisco, then LA, Portland, all throughout Utah, all throughout the metro in Washington, DC, and Times Square. So that was my September 2020. I ran out of money, and in Canada, no sign companies would work with me, and I was on this mission that I had determined beforehand I wasn't going to stop until this child abuse stops, so I did the only thing I could do. They might be able to take down my billboard, but they can't take one off my back. So I became a billboard. And in this day and age, this is what it means to be a dad. A human male who protects his kids from gender ideology. I've got the same sign for moms, of course. But my main message is about this medical abuse, what is undoubtedly the greatest child abuse scandal in modern medicine history. This business of giving puberty blockers to children. What are puberty blockers? Well, these are drugs that have never been approved by any health body anywhere in the world for the purpose they're being used. This is a cancer drug. It's a drug that was given FDA and Health Canada approval to treat prostate cancer. It treats endometriosis in women. I'm sure a couple women here have been on this drug. It's normally called Lupron, is the one given. It's used for uterine fibroids. It's the same drug used to chemically castrate pedophiles, used to this day. Because what does it do? The technical term, these are gonadotropin-releasing hormone agonists for the doctors in the room. And it stops the pituitary gland from releasing luteinizing hormone and follicle-stimulating hormone, which in turn, at the onset of puberty, boys will generate testosterone, girls will start to produce estrogen. But what this drug does is it takes that down basically to nothing. So for men, it takes their testosterone down to nothing so it doesn't feed the cancer. For women, it takes their estrogen down. For pedophiles, it takes their testosterone to nothing, so it kills their sex drive. And for kids, it stops them going into puberty. Because it's the onset of our hormones that trigger our secondary sex characteristics. Girls' breasts start to grow, their hips get wider, boys' penises grow. All the things that happen during puberty, hair growth, etc. None of that will happen while kids are on this drug. Now, if I were to steelman the left's argument, if I were to support their argument, what they would say is, it would be too traumatizing to let these kids go through puberty because they were born in the wrong body. And if we let a boy start to look like a man, well, that can't be undone. So we need to keep them looking neutral and then give them the opposite sex's hormones so these boys look more feminine or so these girls look like a man. But these kids who show up at these gender clinics invariably have a variety of mental health disorders. Autism is extremely prevalent with these children. Probably half the cases, I want to say even more, but I can say with absolute certainty from a study of 1,069 children from the Tavistock, the biggest gender clinic in the world in England, 35% of those kids had moderate to severe autism, not including the mild cases. A majority of the children had 5 or more coexisting mental health comorbidities. There's abuse, there's trauma, there's sexual abuse. The president of the American College of Pediatricians, the former president, he's still a practicing physician. This is the sensible body of pediatricians in the United States. He estimates 60% of these kids have been sexually abused. Boys and girls, especially girls. Tell me, what's a girl going to feel like when she's been sexually abused? She's not going to love being a girl in that moment. It's going to be the biggest trauma she's ever experienced. And so now, instead of just hiding in a hoodie and slouching and wearing baggy clothing, trying to hide to themselves, well, now they can just say, I'm a boy, and they can get their breasts cut off. This is their escape. So this is just child abuse being perpetrated on the most vulnerable in our society. In British Columbia, there's a psychologist who works for the Ministry of Children and Family Development. His name is Wallace Wong. About 5 years ago, he gave a talk at the Vancouver Public Library where he said, and this is all recorded, you can listen to the audio, you can read the transcript. If you want to make a note and look this up right now, you can Google Wallace Wong and Bridgehead. You'll find the article with all the transcript and audio. But this man says he's transitioning more than 1,000 kids in BC, including more than 500 in state care. There are only about 6,000 kids in state care last I checked. That's about 8% of all the kids in state care in BC being transitioned. And guess what? In Canada, 52% of children in state care are Indigenous. So they're sterilizing Indigenous kids. White kids, black kids, brown kids, but the most vulnerable kids. To be honest with you, it's mostly white kids who are falling for this cult of gender. But it's the vulnerable children. And it's children who would grow up to be gay. All of the academic studies that were done before we started giving kids puberty blockers showed that the vast majority of the time, the most recent study that was done before this craze of drugging kids, completed in 2004, when this was still a rare thing, this so-called gender dysphoria, this distress with their sex. This used to affect maybe 1 out of 30,000 kids, and it was mostly boys. But this study, out of 139 kids that they followed from a very young age all the way up into their 20s, showed that 87.8% of them grew out of it. The cure for this distress was puberty. Growing up, getting older, maturing. Now we block the cure. And a majority of these kids grew up to be gay as adults. So the 2S LGBTQIA+, I forgot the P, my apologies. this virtue signaling that we get from our government. Well, they're harming kids who would grow up to be gay. Why don't they talk about that? A lot of the gay community is talking about this now. A lot of them push this. A lot of them project their own issues growing up where they were bullied and they were maybe not fitting in, and they project that onto these children, and they say, leave these kids alone, when they see me with my terribly hateful sign that says children cannot consent to puberty blockers. But they haven't thought about it. These are kids just like them. Because what is a trans child? Well, they don't exist. They're just kids who are having various struggles, and maybe they don't conform to what are really sexist and regressive stereotypes. That's it. It's a label. It's not biological, it's psychological, and it's just a label that we're putting on kids when we should be leaving them alone and letting them grow up. The science. This is the science. It's a gingerbread man, a genderbread person. This is produced by some activist, just a person, but this is used in children's hospitals to teach the staff. It's used in schools all over the world. It defines gender identity. It's hard to see, but I'll tell you what it says there. It says your gender identity is based on your personality, your job, hobbies, likes, dislikes, roles in society, and expectations upon you. What does your job have to do with your gender? We got away from this. We told all girls in the 80s and 90s they can be whatever they want to be when they grow up, and they can. They just can't be a man. Because there's such a thing as reality. Your personality? Really? I mean, truthfully, that's all it is. It's personality. I have this expression that there are two sexes, there are zero genders, and there are infinite personalities. Because that just sums us all up. And there's no right or wrong way to be a girl or a boy. So what the heck are we doing telling kids that they were born wrong? It's abuse. So today I don't want you to take my word for anything, because I'm just a crazy guy who stands out on the street wearing signs. What do I know? I used to be a financial advisor. Ultimately, this is common sense. As human beings, we all know what men and women are. Anyone who says they don't is lying to themselves. Even dogs know the difference. Babies know the difference. But let's listen to the experts. So I've got a few videos to start from Boston Children's Hospital. This was the premier gender clinic in the United States of America, the number one ranked children's hospital. And I found these videos on their YouTube channel that they'd produced. And I'm going to show you just a few, but this is how they define what being transgender is.
A child will often know that they are transgender from the moment that they have any ability to express themselves, and parents will often tell us this. We have parents who tell us that their kids, they knew from the minute they were born practically, and actions like refusing to get a haircut or standing to urinate, trying to stand to urinate, refusing to stand to urinate, trying on siblings' clothing, playing with the quote opposite gender toys, things like that. There is more and more a group of adolescents that we are seeing that really are coming to the realization that they might be trans or gender diverse a little bit later on in their life. So what we're seeing from them is that they always sort of knew something was maybe off and didn't have the understanding to know that they might be trans or have a different gender identity than the one they had been assigned. So that is a growing population that we are seeing, and that's being recognized as being trans and able to be treated.
Well, isn't that good news? If you play with the wrong toys, you're able to be treated. Yes, so she said that assigned at birth, it's nonsense. Our sex is observed at birth. These people are just kind of crazy. Let's listen to another so-called expert here.
So most of the patients that we have in the GEMS clinic actually know their gender, usually around the age of puberty, but a good portion of children do know as early as seemingly from the womb. And seemingly from the womb.
So naturally, they all support abortion. What about the transgender fetuses? They're killing transgender fetuses. Remember, these are children's hospitals. Now listen to this.
Gender-affirming hysterectomy is very similar to most hysterectomies that occur. A hysterectomy itself is the removal of the uterus, the cervix, which is the opening of the uterus, and the fallopian tubes, which are attached to the sides of the uterus. Some gender-affirming hysterectomies will also include the removal of the ovaries, but that's technically a separate procedure called a bilateral oophorectomy. And not every gender-affirming hysterectomy includes that, and people who are getting gender-affirming hysterectomies do not have to have their ovaries removed.
Well, isn't that a relief? Gender-affirming hysterectomies being done at a children's hospital. They're sending teenage girls into menopause. How many women here, may I please have a show of hands? How many women here, please have a show of hands? Sorry, I got distracted there. How many women here loved going through puberty? Shoot, my streak is still intact. Not yet has one hand ever gone up in the air. It's a tough time. Your bodies are changing. You're getting sexualized by men. I think it's tougher for girls than boys. It can be tough for boys too, but suddenly you go from this innocent little 10-year-old, 11-year-old child to getting sexualized by men and all that sort of stuff, and it's hard. And emotions and hormones. It's natural not to like this time in life. Now we're telling these children with other mental health problems and maybe terrible home lives or whatever, that there's something wrong with them and they can just change their bodies if they want. And we're sterilizing kids because these drugs and hormones together are sterilizing kids, and I'll present more evidence for that later as well. But, my word, these are the professionals. Here's another professional. So this man on the right who's speaking, that's a man. He says he's a woman. His name is Marcy Bowers. He's the president of the World Professional Association for Transgender Health. This is essentially just an activist organization. It is not rooted in science, but they write what are called the standards of care that our children's hospitals follow, that children's hospitals all around the world follow. And so let's listen to what this guy has to say about the boys who start on puberty blockers at what is known as Tanner Stage 2. So Tanner Stage 2 is the technical term for the beginning of puberty. For girls, this will be a couple years before their periods start, really when their breasts first start to form. So they're gonna be 10, 11 years old. Boys are typically about 6 months later. So these are very small children still. They're in grade 5, 6.
The second was an observation that I had that every single child or adolescent who was truly blocked at Tanner Stage 2 has never experienced orgasm. I mean, it's really about zero. These are just assigned male at birth, so trans feminine, and it's because they never in their lives are exposed to testosterone. That doesn't change. So blockers prevent the rise of testosterone, and they don't really go on testosterone at or around surgery or into adulthood. And so we don't know. They're going to have the sensation. There's no question about that. But are they going to be able to achieve sexual satisfaction? It's important in relationships, and I know that from my work with female genital mutilation survivors, that the lack of being able to be intimate with a partner is very important. And so this is what really raised the red flag for me, is to say, look, we need to have our eyes open about it. I think it's been beneficial talking about it. I know Joe and many others have reported to me, they've changed their approach a little bit in their informed consent models, and that we're talking about masturbation now. We're talking about, okay, that's an area of the body that's got very dysphoric for you, but you know what? All a penis is just a large clitoris. I mean, it's all the same material. It really is. So use it for for the pleasurable purposes, partially that it was intended, and we'll see what happens. But these are to be answered questions. So can we avoid puberty and get good adult results? And secondly, how do we assure someone that they're going to be able to be sexually responsive? Do we remove the blockers during the course of their adolescence and let a little bit of puberty come back? Do we delay it a little bit, maybe into 10 or 3 or 4, maybe before they have their first orgasms? Maybe.
The president of the World Association for Transgender Health, spitballing on a Zoom call about what do we do? Do we let some puberty happen? Do we take them off the blockers? Do we start them later on the blockers? They don't know what they're doing. And they're doing it to tens of thousands of children. So what do we do? Well, we talk. We tell the truth. Those Boston Children's Hospital videos I showed you when I first tweeted them out, they went very viral. There were other videos where they talk about phalloplasties. This is where they carve out all the tissue of a girl's forearm, or maybe her thigh, and they fashion this into a fake phallus, which they then sew to their groin and pull the urethra through. Or boys, they castrate them completely and slice open their penis and then invert it to form what's called a neovagina. And yes, this is being done to kids as young as 16, which you'll hear from one of these experts. But what happens is these kids were put on puberty blockers so their genitals never grew and they don't have enough tissue to do the surgery. So what do? They cut out some of the boy's or young man's colon, or some of his peritoneum, the lining of the abdominal cavity, and they use that to form the interior lining of this fake vagina. Some people have died from this surgery. In the initial study that was ever done, this whole thing is called the Dutch protocol. This giving kids puberty blockers first started in Holland in the late 90s. And they had an initial study, I think, of 65 kids. I could be a little off on that. But 15 of them dropped out of the study. They don't have any idea what happened to them. One of the kids died when he went to get his surgery. And this study has since been really discredited, but it's from that this theory was born, and it was exported all across the world. And when they first started this in Holland, at least, they would screen kids for other mental health comorbidities. They would screen for autism and trauma and abuse and all that. And they wouldn't give the kids the opposite sex's hormones until they were 16. And they wouldn't start puberty blockers on 10-year-olds either. But over time, all these safeguards have completely vanished to the point today where no therapy is needed at all. And the trend from these trans activists is they don't want therapy to be given to these kids. Because to even suggest therapy is needed is to invalidate their gender identity. Because we are to believe this is not a mental illness. We are to believe this is an innate part of their soul. They just have a gender identity which is different than their sex. And so why would they need therapy for that? If a 10-year-old girl says she's a boy, the job of these therapists and doctors is to say, "Wonderful, sweetheart. We're so glad you found your true self." And that's what they do. Here in Ontario, a letter was sent out to all the GPs in a particular part of southern Ontario. I forget which district, but I tweeted this out. I'll probably tweet it again, just to show everyone. But the waiting list at the gender clinic was so long that they told the GPs, just start these kids on puberty blockers while they're waiting to come into the gender clinic. What do these GPs know about gender dysphoria? Nothing. They're not trained for this. In truth, none of these people are really trained for it, because training doesn't involve sterilizing children and cutting off their body parts. But that's where we're at. So I've been speaking up, a lot of people have been speaking up, you're all speaking up, Max has been speaking up about this since before I started. So thank you so much to Maxime Bernier. Which other politicians in Canada are speaking up? Crickets. Crickets. The Conservative Party could do so much. They have a massive megaphone. They could lead on issues. They could have led on the COVID issues when our freedoms were taken away. But they didn't. They waited 2 years until it became so popular that they had no choice but to speak out. It wasn't until the trucker protest that Poilievre said anything. There was one man in this country who got arrested as a politician, and his name's Maxime Bernier. And of course, he won the ensuing court case. And it takes 2 years, but this is what they do. These tyrants, the punishment is the process. We have rights, but they pretend we don't have rights. Then you have to go to court and spend all your money if you can get the money. The punishment is the process. And on this issue, my gosh, this is worse. I had to wait in long lineups to go into Home Depot, and some people couldn't go into restaurants to eat. But they are sterilizing autistic children and cutting off the breasts of 14-year-old girls, and not one of these politicians in Ottawa will say a damn thing. It's not okay. They have a responsibility. Poilievre says, I don't know what I can do federally, to be honest with you. This is a provincial issue. Really? He voted for a bill called Bill C6 that made it a crime to help your little girl feel comfortable as a girl. It's okay to convince her she's a boy, but if you object to sterilizing your own kid, and you say, no, sweetheart, you're not a boy, that's conversion therapy. And you can go to jail for 5 years. Psychotherapists, professional counselors won't even talk to these children because there are so many kids struggling with this. If you're a psychotherapist, if you're a counselor with a specialty in this, your business will be booming 24 hours a day. Literally every counselor in this country could have a practice just talking to these kids. But I can find 1 or 2, maybe 3 in the country who will talk to them because they're afraid of getting their license pulled, of having trans activists say that can be conversion therapy, and then they're going to be in court defending their reputation, and so they just won't do it. It's all done in secret. It's an outrage. So it's been up to the citizens, and in political circles, it's up to the PPC to hold this Conservative Party accountable for actual conservatism. Not even conservatism. This is just common sense. This is just defending against child abuse. And going forward, it's going to remain our role. Because they're just not leaders. They're afraid of what the media says. Honestly, who cares what the media says? Why do they care? What are they going to say? What do they say about me? Oh, he's against puberty blockers. He says trans kids don't exist. They don't. They're called girls and boys, and they're beautiful just as they are. My gosh, what a terrible message. How hateful am I? Saying that kids who are going to grow up gay are beautiful just as they are. Leave them alone. They've got nothing, so they don't say anything about me because I give them nothing hateful to say. I had a protest here in Ottawa back in 2021. I got mobbed by 300 brainwashed university students. Chanel, is she here today? She's not here. She was with me. One other man came out with me in the afternoon. In the morning, it was just me against 300, and all the media, and all the police. I got punched in the head twice. I got painted on. I had my signs destroyed. I had my car keyed, and I got spat on. Police did nothing. I talked to CBC for 18 minutes on camera. I filmed it myself, of course, as well. I talked to CTV for 15 minutes. It was front page news in the Ottawa Citizen. It was the first thing they talked about on the news at night here. And guess how much of my interview they aired? 0. Why? Because the story was written. Hateful protest. And all they were looking for from me was a hateful quote. And I spoke to them at length, and they got nothing. So that's a big win for me. But this is the message for all of us. There are ways to talk about this where these haters, the real haters on the left, they can't touch you. What message does it send when you tell a girl she's a boy? Let's talk about pronouns. What message does it send when you call a girl he, him? You're telling her that she was supposed to be something she's not. Imagine being told that as a little girl or boy. It's horrid. So the positive message, and when we're messaging, we need to be positive, and we need to have vision and give hope. The positive message is that children are beautiful just as they are. There's no right way to be a boy or a girl. Nobody can disagree with that. So when I'm on the street having these conversations and crazy people come up to me, angry people come up to me, normally they're not capable of having a conversation. They just want to yell and swear, and then they run away. But the tactic, if they stand there for more than 10 seconds, my tactic is to say things that they agree with. Look, you're not going to change the mind of this angry person in that moment, wherever you are. But you can say things that they agree with, and then they're dumbfounded. And it'll bring down the temperature. So you say children are beautiful just as they are. I don't think we should put kids in some stereotypical box. Who's going to disagree? Nobody. And then you ask them questions. You say, what does it mean for a girl to be a boy? What is a transgender child? What is a woman? They have no answers for these questions. For them now, a woman is just a feeling. They admit this to me all the time. But by saying things that they agree with, you cause this beautiful thing called cognitive dissonance, where there are now two competing ideas going on in their brain. They thought, this guy's a terrible bigot, racist, transphobe, homophobe, whatever they want to call you. Oh, he just said something I totally agree with, and it's very kind and loving. They have to make sense of these two things, because they're confused. They're not all evil. A lot of them have been lied to and deceived. They're perpetrating evil, but they're not all inherently evil. 90% of the people who give me verbal abuse on the street are young women. They're not evil, but they've been lied to. And there are really only 3 objections that you'll ever hear. The first objection is kids are going to kill themselves if we don't transition them. Think about this for a second. The only way you can justify doing what they're doing to kids is to say, well, if we don't do it, they'll die. That's their argument. Is there evidence? Of course not, because it's not true. And for a long time, we didn't really have evidence to prove that it was not true either, other than the fact that every time there is a suicide, they scream about it, and they scream at people like me. They call me a stochastic terrorist, meaning I'm responsible for other people's crimes and the harm that comes to other people. But we do have data now. We have data out of Finland that came out this year. And they did a study. They looked at data from their gender clinic from 1996 to 2019, 23 years, 2,000 kids. And they compared it to a control group of 17,000 kids. And over those 23 years at the gender clinic, and these kids weren't all getting the drugs and hormones over this time, because things used to be different. There were 6 suicides. It worked out to an annualized rate of 0.052%. And it was similar to the control group. So every suicide is a tragedy, of course, but this was not some outrageous number. This was to be expected from kids who have other mental health comorbidities, which was the common denominator among kids in both of these groups. Because these are always just struggling kids. And obviously struggling kids are going to have higher suicidal ideation, and occasionally there's going to be a suicide, and it's a tragedy. But we don't help them by affirming a delusion. We have data just from the NHS now, the National Health Service in the UK, from the Tavistock, their biggest gender clinic. They banned puberty blockers starting in December 2020. The High Court actually put a ban in place. They lost on an appeal. But they have some data from all these kids who were on the waiting list, not getting these drugs and hormones, and other children. and the suicide rate was extremely low. There were very few suicides. So it's just not true. And it's used to manipulate and to coerce parents into going along with this. Because these kids and parents will be at the gender clinic. And like what happened to my friend Chloe Cole down in California, when they cut off her breasts at 15 and they started her on puberty blockers at 13 and testosterone. Her parents were told, if we don't do this, she's probably going to die. They tell them you can have a girl or a trans son, a dead girl or a living son. Wow. You have these depressed, struggling kids, and now you're telling their parents that dead girl or live son. And you're a doctor. You're the authority figure. They're trusting. But really, you're just an ideologue. This is awful. There's no evidence for it. The second argument is that puberty blockers are reversible. We just heard a video from the president of WPATH where he says none of these boys as adults have ever been able to have an orgasm. Doesn't sound reversible. Is time reversible? Is there a time machine? No. When those years of puberty pass, they're gone. You don't go through puberty in your 20s. They're gone. Those ages of development are gone. We have some studies showing that it causes IQ loss. Even with sheep, there was cognitive impairment. There are all sorts of harms coming from these drugs and hormones, which we're going to get into. That's that study from England I told you about. 35% of the kids had autism. Let's get to some of the good news, because there is good news happening. The first country to break away from WPATH's standards was Finland, because they did something radical. They looked at the evidence. They did a systematic review, the gold standard in medicine, and they looked at all of the scientific literature and they found, really, there's no evidence. There's no evidence. There's never been a clinical study. There's no data. The evidence that we do have is extremely poor. Nothing shows that it's helping these kids. There's no evidence at all. So they basically put a stop to this there. A few kids are being studied. Sweden then followed up. They looked at more than 9,000 abstracts. They found there were only 24 studies. We're not talking clinical trials. But they also put a stop to this because they found there was no evidence this was helping kids. In a systematic review, they reviewed more than 9,900 abstracts from 15 scientific databases. The review concluded that the long-term effects of hormone therapy on psychosocial health could not be evaluated due to lack of studies with sufficient quality. Concerning bone health, it delays bone maturation. We've known this forever. A side effect of these drugs is it decreases your bone density. In Sweden, there was a documentary done called The Trans Train, where they talked to this girl. She's 15 years old. She was on puberty blockers from 12 to 15, and she developed a condition called osteopenia, like osteoporosis, in chronic pain because of bone loss. I talked to a mother in California, same deal. They did bone scans on her each year. Over 3 years, she lost 11% of her bone density at a time when her bones should be getting stronger, not weaker. Earlier this year, the WPATH files were released. That video I showed you that was leaked earlier, but from the same sort of database, all of these other files and videos were leaked, showing that these experts themselves know they're committing abuse. They know that these children can't consent. They know the parents don't even understand what they're signing up for. And so this was pretty groundbreaking because it's all assembled into a nice package. My friend Mia Hughes, right here from Ottawa, right across the river, wrote the report for Michael Schellenberger, and that has helped to change the conversation on this subject. And so we're going to listen to a few more videos from these health experts before we get to some Q&A. So here they are talking about basically the ability of children to consent to any of this.
I just wanted to piggyback on all of the importance that comes up with the informed consent issues. I often see people who, because there's such a backlog of therapists to do some of the mental health therapeutic support, I often see people who have already engaged in some sort of, and this is again with youth, who've already engaged in some sort of medical intervention. And so one of the things I do is I just I'm sitting with the youth and their parents, and I say, oh, well, so tell me more about what you know about that medical intervention. And kind of like what Dan was saying, you know, children and young adolescents, we wouldn't really expect them. It's kind of a developmental, it's out of their developmental range sometimes to understand the extent to which some of these medical interventions are impacting them.
We do it, we try to talk about it, but most of the kids are nowhere in any kind of a brain space to really talk about it in a serious way. That's always bothered me, but you know, we still want the kids to be happier in the moment, right?
And
we know these kids aren't developmentally mature enough to understand, but we still want them to be happy, right? In the moment. That's the BC endocrinologist from the BC Children's Hospital speaking there, that guy. But so children, obviously these struggling children, they can't understand, but they have parents, right?
I think now that I follow a lot of kids into their mid-20s, I'm always like, oh, the dog isn't doing it for you, right?
Oh, sorry, I went too far. This is the last one.
I think now that I follow a lot of kids into their...
Oh, I did it again.
I think now that I follow a lot of kids into their mid-20s, I'm always like, oh, the dog isn't doing it for you, right? Yeah, they're like, no, I just found this, you know, wonderful partner, and now we're kids, and...
All right, I skipped a slide, doesn't matter. So what he's talking about there is he follows these kids into their 20s, and they want to have a family, but they can't because they're sterilized. And what does he say? Oh, the dog's not doing it for you, is it? As though having a dog is a replacement for having a family. And these kids are depressed now, and they're 25, and the love bombing that they got when they were 12 and 15 and 18, that's all gone. Their friends are all growing up, getting married, and they're left with a mutilated body. Maybe they don't have their womb. Maybe they were put on puberty blockers and the cross-sex hormones at such an early stage that they were sterilized just from that alone. And they can never have a family. A lot of 20-year-old women in this room would have swore they were never going to have kids. And then they get to 30, and they're telling their husband, it's either babies or a divorce, babe. Because we grow up and we change, and the prefrontal cortex, the part of our brain responsible for logical decision-making, doesn't finish developing until we're about 25. And it's even longer for these neurodivergent kids, the ones who have autism, who make up half of these cases. These are just callous people who are ideologues. They are, for all practical purposes, in a cult. The cult of the gendered soul. Yes, it's a cult. It's like you have a soul with a different gender than your body. It's crazy. So let's look at some of their internal messages.
I think now that I follow a lot of kids into their...
So this is Marcy Bowers again speaking, the president of WPATH, saying the fertility question has no research that I'm aware of, as puberty onset allows for fertility options, while blockers preclude those opportunities. They admit it sterilizes kids. On the consent forms they sign, it's on there. I've tweeted those out several times. He confirms yet again, I'm unaware of an individual claiming ability to orgasm when they were blocked at Tanner stage 2. He's the president, he would know. He's done 2,000 of these sex reassignment surgeries on boys. Here's an interesting case. I have one transition friend, colleague, who after about 9 or 10 years of testosterone developed hepatocarcinoma, liver cancer. To the best of my knowledge, it was linked to his hormonal treatment. Her hormonal treatment. This is a woman. So they're causing cancer. Hello, folks. I have an incoming 13-year-old, identified as non-binary, referred to me for assessment to start testosterone. A possible complication sounds like there's some purposeful malnutrition and restrictive eating for a more non-binary appearance. Eating disorders are extremely prevalent in this group of girls, and they go along with other mental health issues. Trauma is common among trans clients. Nonetheless, I was surprised to find that several of my clients met criteria for dissociative disorders. They transitioned them anyway. This one's interesting. It's my understanding that for top surgery, their euphemism for a double mastectomy, medical and mental health issues need to be reasonably well controlled, and for genital surgery, the issues need to be well controlled. However, there's not a clear line on what that means. Someone can have schizophrenia and be ready for surgery. Schizophrenia. A serious mental condition involving a breakdown in the relation between thought, emotion, and behavior, leading to faulty perception, inappropriate actions and feelings, withdrawal from reality and personal relationships, into fantasy and delusion, a sense of mental fragmentation. They're transitioning kids with schizophrenia. This is Jamie Reed. She's a whistleblower from the Washington University Transgender Clinic in St. Louis, Missouri. She's not a conservative. She describes herself as a queer woman, married to a trans man, politically left of Bernie Sanders, which I didn't know was possible. But she blew the whistle on all this, and she said all the same things that I'm telling you here today, because she worked as case manager at that gender clinic for 4 years. She dealt with more than 1,000 children. They were sending kids straight from the psychiatric ward. One boy was sexually abusing dogs. They gave him puberty blockers. These are the most troubled children. This isn't about having some gender identity, folks. That's a lie. These are struggling children with serious mental health issues, and kids who've been deceived and indoctrinated into a cult that turns them into irreversible, lifelong pharmaceutical patients who have suffered irreversible harm. That's what this is. So this is just child abuse, pure and simple, and we're going to put a stop to it. And we're going to put a stop to it because of people in this room and people like Jamie Reed who are speaking up. And what happened after she blew the whistle? In Missouri, she filed an affidavit with the Attorney General. They started an investigation. They have now passed a law stopping this abuse. They also, in their law, they made it so that kids who were already receiving these puberty-blocking drugs could continue. But what did they do? They extended the statute of limitations where kids could sue. Because previously in the United States, depending on the state, the statute of limitations for medical maltreatment was only 1 to 3 years. And it virtually always takes longer than that for these kids to pull out of this. Because again, this is like a cult. They bought into it. They start the puberty blockers, hoping that'll make them feel better. But they've also bought into the cross-sex hormones, which they start. That's supposed to make them feel better. That's supposed to be their true self. Then the surgeries are supposed to be the icing on the cake. But they're chasing a delusion, they're chasing a fantasy, and they're still miserable. And by the time they eventually pull out of this, well, it's too late, they can't sue. So they extended the time period they could sue. And what happened? The lawyers at the gender clinic said, we don't like this liability. We are shutting it down. So now this is totally stopped in Missouri, and the existing kids can't even continue it. It's great. In 25 states in the US, they've legislated a stop to this. And 2 years ago, no one wanted to talk about it. Politicians wouldn't touch it. They were just like our politicians. So one of my strategies has been we need to fix things in the US, because I know when the American Academy of Pediatrics and the American Medical Association finally get their act together, Health Canada won't be able to avoid it any longer. They can pretend England doesn't exist, and Sweden and Finland and Germany and France and all these other countries who are making progress, but they can't ignore the US. We also get a lot of US media up here in Canada, so that's how a lot of people up here become aware of this. But it all starts with just having conversations, because we have an advantage that the left doesn't have. They have hundreds of millions of dollars that they spend on propaganda, but we have the truth, and the truth spreads for free. Couple more videos just to back up things we said, and then I'm going to get to the good news and Q&A. This person speaking here is Kellen Lockhart. This is actually a woman speaking. She says she's a man. This is another problem with this whole thing. We have all these people themselves who have bought into this, who run these medical associations. They're biased. People who identify as trans should not be writing healthcare policy for people who identify as trans, because they're not giving evidence-based medical diagnoses or treatment. It's all biased, it's all ideologically driven. I essentially wrote this on Twitter one day, on X, about an official in Australia, this woman named Teddy Cook, who's had a double mastectomy. She's got a beard. She says she's a man. She tweets out porn all the time. Porn is a huge part of this too, especially for the boys who get sucked into this. She tweets even bestiality. And the Daily Mail wrote this article about her because naturally this woman, who's just an activist, who's just an ideologue, who's transitioned herself, she was appointed to a panel at the World Health Organization to write the healthcare policy all across the world for kids and adults who identify as trans. That's the WHO for you. So what did I do? I wrote this tweet. And I'll admit, it wasn't my nicest tweet in the history of the world. I wrote, people who belong in psychiatric wards are writing healthcare policy for people who belong in psychiatric wards. And it's technically true. And I called her a man, I called her a woman because she is. But in Australia, they're ahead of us in censorship. And they have, courtesy of a law a few years ago, they have an office in the government called the E-Safety Commissioner's Office. And it's her job, this woman's job, Julie Inman Grant, an American woman, who said at the World Economic Forum that we need to recalibrate free speech, whatever that means. But her job is to determine what Australians can see and say on the internet. And she didn't like my tweet. So she ordered X to take it down. They blocked it in Australia, but it's still up. And so I filed an appeal with their Administrative Appeals Tribunal. And then, amazingly, Elon filed an appeal. X filed an appeal for my post. And I mentioned good things happen when you go outside. I meet all sorts of amazing people. I was in Washington State a couple months ago, and I really needed lawyers because I have no money, because it doesn't pay well to stand out on the street wearing sandwich board. But I had lunch with this woman, my friend Tiffany Justice, co-founder of Moms for Liberty, this parental rights group in the States. They're amazing. She's one of my best friends. And I had lunch with this lawyer named Kate Anderson, who's senior legal counsel for the Alliance Defending Freedom in the United States. They're a Christian-based nonprofit, pro bono law firm, basically, who help on all sorts of issues that we would all love. And this is one of their main issues. So she was going to get me in touch with ADF International, those guys, to maybe help me in Australia. And I'm getting sidetracked here, but I'll come back to why in a minute. So good things happen when you go outside. A week later, I went to London, just because I like to go to London. There's a lot of people there. It's a good center for Europe. I get media friends and all sorts of things happening, and I just have faith that when I put myself out there, good things will happen. So the first night there, I was having dinner with Andy No, who literally wrote the book on Antifa. He's originally from Portland, Oregon. He suffered a brain injury when he was attacked by Antifa doing journalism, and he now lives in London because it's not safe for him there. But he invited some friend over, and this woman came over at about 10:30 at night, and who was it? Her name's Lois McClatchy Miller. And because I have amazing luck or coincidences, she happened to be the spokesperson for ADF International. I'm not particularly a man of faith, but so many things happen that sometimes I wonder. And there happened to be a parental rights conference going on with their legal firm in Vienna, Austria the next day. So they flew me over there, I met the top guys, and I now have legal representation fighting this censorship in Australia. And it could be a precedent-setting thing. And the reason this is important is because all of these Western countries, including Canada, are trying to do this with us. In Canada, we have Bill C-63. And how do they sell this bill? They sell it the same way they sold it in Australia. They said they were going to get rid of child sexual exploitation online and revenge porn. And that this is the Trojan horse with which they sell all of these things. And they're trying to do the same thing in Canada. But if we give them that power, they're going to extend it, as they have now in Australia, onto everything, such as misgendering people online. So I got sidetracked, but we also need to fight this censorship bill in Canada hard, because it's not just about protecting kids, it's about censoring your freedom of speech. But again, just put yourself out there and good things will happen. Anyway, let's get back to this issue. This is Kellen Lackhart talking about the youngest ages they've done these procedures on kids.
Yeah, I think folks are going to cover the blockers and
Volume.
talk about surgical care a little bit. In terms of masculinizing top surgery, I think 12 is the youngest who's had surgery through our program. And in terms of general reconstructive surgeries, we haven't had anyone under the age of 18 have phalloplasty or vaginoplasty, but we have had a few patients starting 15. I don't think surgery actually happened.
Okay, the volume's really bad there. They did a double mastectomy on a 12-year-old, and they cut off the genitals of 16-year-old boys, having started the process at 15. And when they say started the process, I believe they're referring to hair removal, which has to be done for 6 months to a year in advance. This is just ghoulish stuff. This here is another leading expert, one of the top ones in the United States, one of the top ones in the world. And these people all talk to our Canadian pediatricians and our Canadian medical bodies as well. This is Johanna Olsen-Kennedy, who runs the busiest gender clinic in North America in Los Angeles, talking about girls who have had their breasts cut off.
Right? But so what we do know is that adolescents actually have the capacity to make a reasoned, logical decision. And here's the other thing about chest surgery. If you want breasts at a later point in your life, you can go and get them.
Insanity. Yes, thank you. If you want breasts at a later point in life, you can go and get them. Breasts are not bags of silicone. Breasts feed babies. And by the way, they can't just go buy them, because it's often not possible. They don't have the tissue to be able to do it. But these people are demented. This is one of the leading officials in the world. This is how they talk about our children. So I'll probably skip a bunch of this stuff. I sometimes use this, but these are a few of my adventures outside. That guy ended up breaking my arm with a traffic cone. I got mobbed by a bunch of people on the street in Montreal a few years ago. And I want to thank Antifa very much, because when things like this happen, all it does is give my campaign a boost. It's always important we use these fascists to, whatever they try with us, we use it and we make it backfire. So that's what I did. And it showed who our opposition is. These are just violent thugs who try to silence us by any means possible. And we can never stop. So the next day I went to Queen's University and had some conversations there. This is in Ottawa a couple years ago. I stay calm, they're all crazy, we win, right? That's what we do. We don't need to yell back at them, we don't need to convince them. We do what they're trying to do. They're trying to get a rise out of me. They want me to do something violent so the media can all report on that. But we show them for what they are, and the broad public opinion comes with us. This was last year at a Transgender Day of Visibility thing I went to. I was giving a talk with a journalist.
They're getting that kind of representation. I mean, it's clearly was aggressive violence.
You suck, fuck you, you're not wanted, fuck you, you're a fucking idiot, you're a fucking
I don't know what to say. I guess these police officers are mostly indoctrinated as well. They're afraid of the mob. I think they're afraid that if they do anything to actually keep law and order, then they'll end up being on the end of this verbal abuse. So it's just cowardice from everybody all around.
People probably want to know, how do you keep your composure?
What's that?
How do you keep your composure?
Fuck you, 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 fuck you.
Sorry about the language.
Fuck you, fuck you, fuck you.
I apologize for the language. I show this because we had 36 police there. He ended up punching me in the throat, punching me in the head, pulled on my shirt. The other guy pushed simultaneously, and I took a bit of a tumble. The investigating officer was smiling throughout, and nothing happened to that man. But because we get this on video, what happened was, and I just met someone from VPD last week on the street, they received thousands and thousands of complaints from all over the world. They haven't fired her, but they have started an internal investigation into the police conduct, so we'll see what happens. But these are ugly events, and I'm sorry about all that language. I don't like showing that, but I think it's important people see kind of what we're up against. It's a relatively small minority who push this, but they're loud, and they're angry, and they're aggressive, and they scare people. And we don't need to be scared, but we do need men to stand up. We need dads to stand up. And we just need to stay calm and be normal, and we win, and we're winning, and these events actually help. So I want to thank them very much as well, because that particular tweet got 40 million views. I picked up 80,000 followers that day, so now I'm able to reach a lot more people. But yeah, we just got to make this stuff backfire. Let's get to some of the good news. We're winning. So I just showed you that protest I had in Ottawa where I got mobbed by 300 university students. This was last year, same street. 500 people with me, not 2. Those are all the states in the US who put a stop to this. And lawsuits are coming. So there's a firm in Texas, 4 dads all left their previous law firms just to start one to sue for these kids. I think they're all Christian men. They felt a calling to defend these kids. So they could have done a million things to make money in this world, but they all left their law firms, started a new one. They have more than a dozen cases going on. One of those involves the American Academy of Pediatrics as well. There are lawsuits going on in dozens of states because every state that put a stop to this, the American Civil Liberties Union and the Department of Justice sued. Because they're suing for the right to sterilize kids. That's what the ACLU does these days. It's just as bad up here. We have one lawsuit in Canada going on with a young adult. So we'll see where that goes. But all of this benefits everyone all over the globe. Because when they go to discovery and they go to court, and some of these cases are going to end up in the Supreme Court, they have no evidence to back any of it up. They've already lost in some of the more regional court cases. Here in Canada, even Pierre Poilievre, this was just 2 days ago. First time he's ever written anything. It's time Canadian medical leaders stood up to gender medicine. That's a quote from this National Post article. What's he doing here? Let's analyze this. It's time Canadian medical leaders stood up. It's not his responsibility, right? Medical leaders. So, yes, he's a coward. In that article, there's a quote talking about how counselors won't treat these kids because of a law that passed a few years ago. It's the law that he voted for. So Bill C-6 was the first bill, and the House approved it. At that time, 62 conservatives voted against it. I think 53 voted for this insane bill. Who was one of the guys that voted for it? His name's Pierre Poilievre. So he was in the minority of conservatives. The bill didn't pass the Senate before the election was called, so the bill died. It came back as C4. And led by a conservative motion, they fast-tracked it through the House. No vote. Anyone object? No. Boom. They were crying and hugging each other in the aisles of Parliament. Then the Senate also fast-tracked it through. And now counselors won't talk to these kids, and parents are afraid their kids are going to get taken away or they're going to go to jail. So Pierre Poilievre, everyone watching this at home, please ask him a question. Are you going to repeal Bill C-4? You said there was nothing you could do federally. Of course there is. You can also lead. You can also be a father instead of a disappointment to your own children. They banned this in England now. Even the Labour Party banned it. They know. Even their leftist party banned it. The evidence is undeniable. What are our politicians doing? Why do we pretend the UK doesn't exist? Why do we pretend all these studies have not been done? Why are we sterilizing and mutilating children for a political ideology? Stop playing politics with our kids' bodies. They're stopping this all over the world. And only one party in Canada has stood up for these kids. It's the PPC. So I've gone a bit long. I've got one last video. It's 2 minutes long. This is a woman named Prisha Mosley. And I'll let her tell you her story, because this is what's going on with tens of thousands of kids. In the United States, 300,000 children between the age of 12 and 17 were diagnosed with gender dysphoria. That doesn't include those not diagnosed. In every school in this country, you will find kids who say they're trans or non-binary. And the most vulnerable end up in these gender clinics being harmed for life. Here's Prisha.
I can't believe this happened. I ruined my life. When you break it down, I decided that I didn't want to be a woman before I had ever even experienced being a woman. I had no idea what being a woman was like because I was a child. And now I feel like I will never entirely know. I want to say that I really feel like some people in the trans community and the trans medicalists and the doctors really, really target the most vulnerable of us. I have borderline personality disorder, and I know for a fact that this is the reason for my transition. It's a very difficult mental illness, and one of the core features is not having any sense of self or identity. And my doctors knew this. I told them, even though they didn't ask, that I had been diagnosed with BPD. And it was all fine to them. I wasn't happy as a girl, so that meant I was a boy and I was trans. And so I just took the cure that was handed to me. I was told that I was being given a cure, and I wouldn't want to kill myself anymore. And it wasn't true. No, I didn't want to cry in this video, but this is such a hard thing to talk about. I lost a lot of things to this, and I just hope that anyone else who's going through what I went through as a young girl will not be prescribed hormones and surgery because of other things. You know, There are so many mental health disorders that make you hate your body. And the solution isn't to change your body, it's to fix your brain, you know? I just don't want anyone else to ever feel this way. I lost my voice, I lost my chest. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to have kids. I feel like no one wants to date me or love me because I'm ruined.
This is child abuse, and the only people who are going to stop it are us. So thank you so much for having me here today. I can't wait for the years to come, because we are winning against a behemoth. We're winning against the UN, World Health Organization, and all of these leftist governments, because they can't control this narrative anymore. Because those 5 letters LGBTQ, they have no power over us anymore. We don't need to be afraid to speak up. They can call us anti-alphabet if they want. Say whatever you want. I know who I am. You know who you are. Your family and friends know who you are. So are we going to be silent while kids are being abused like this? No, we're not. And we're going to wake up more parents having one conversation at a time. And in 10 years' time, we're going to look back at this scandal as a thing of history, because we are going to win this battle one conversation at a time. Thank you so much.
Wow, Chris, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story and for all that you've done to defend all that's good and right and true in this country. You know, we need more leaders like you. We do have a few minutes to take questions. If you could please line up at the microphones. Again, please be quick, state your name, and get right into your question. We have a lot to get through. And Chris, you're okay to stay for a few minutes there?
Thank you so much for your bravery, Chris. My name's Greg Wycliffe. I've started the campaign SaveFreeSpeech.ca to stop Bill C-63. I'm really glad you brought it up on today's presentation. And I had kind of 2 questions. You're a very, very brave man who has literally taken slings and arrows, or in this case, had your arm broken and beaten up many times by certain individuals. And you've taken the abuse, and I would go as far as saying you're used to it. And I guess for other people who maybe aren't used to that sort of backlash for speaking up about this, I guess my first question is, like, what do you think is the #1 obstacle that's preventing regular people from speaking up? Because of course, if you're a PPC person, you're going to be more outspoken. But to encourage more regular people to speak out, what do you think is preventing them from doing that? And if Bill C-63 passes, how do you think that's going to impact or further disincentivize people from speaking up?
So the #1 obstacle that stops people from speaking up is when they don't know how to speak about it. If they don't know how to talk about it, they won't talk about it. So the first solution for that is just simple education. People need to learn the basics about this, which is why I take so much time to go through this, and which is why I show these experts, because you need to know how there's absolutely nothing underlying any of this. This is all just craziness. But there are a lot of ways you can create change in the world. When your first reaction is, oh, I can't do it because look at all the scary things that happen, well, you're looking for reasons not to do something. So instead of doing that, ask yourself, how can I do something? You're not going to get beat up when you go to your school board meeting. You're not going to beat up when you go talk to the principal or just to the teacher. You can go to a place where there's already a police presence. You can go out front of your provincial capital where there's already police and security present. You can get some big burly men to come with you. Or you can go out in the morning because Antifa are all sleeping off their hangovers. There are plenty of ways to do things, but we all have our own gifts. And so people say to me, Chris, what can I do? Well, I don't know, I'm not you. What are you good at? What do you like to do? But you do have to step out of your comfort zone a little bit. And as soon as you do that, your comfort zone is going to expand. Now, as for Bill C-63, well, as it stands, I don't think Trudeau has a chance in heck of getting elected again. So I don't believe the Conservative Party want that bill in place. I don't think it's going to pass because I think it's bad politically for them to push that during an election coming up. But if it does pass, my gosh, again, it's like anything. We just need to raise public awareness because we are propagandized so heavily by all of our media. So you need to use whatever channels you can to educate people about this bill because it's not needed. We already have laws in place to prevent the things that it's trying to prevent. We already have a hate speech law in Canada. Hardly anyone's ever prosecuted based on it because it involves incitements of violence, and the definition of hate is very vague anyway. It has to rise to a level of detestation. Well, what is that? But we have a very censorious government from both sides, and we don't have conservative media, big conservative media like other countries have. So in this day and age, it really comes down to citizen journalists, and it comes down to us spreading the word, and it is working. It's working for sure. So just keep plugging away. That's all I can really say.
Great, thanks, Chris.
Thank you. Yes, sir, over here.
I just want to remind everybody to stay brief because we have several people we want to be able to ask their questions.
Yeah, I'll try to stop rambling so much.
Et si quelqu'un veut parler en français, je suis là pour traduire.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Mario Greco. I ran for the People's Party back in 2021, and I just have a couple of questions. So some have speculated that Iman Khalif, the Algerian boxer who recently competed in the 2024 Olympics, is not transgender but has XY gonadal digenesis, also known as Swyer syndrome, a type of intersex condition. And others have speculated that Iman has XX chromosomes, but a condition that leads to abnormally high testosterone for a woman. What are your thoughts on people who are born with such conditions and with regards to their participation in sports?
Okay, so there's this guy in the Olympics. There's two of them in boxing against women right now. They have what are known as disorders of sexual development, or what the left frequently misname as intersex. Now, intersex is really a misnomer because they're not intersex, they're not between sexes. They are all male or female. But there are a variety of disorders of sexual development. Intersex is just an umbrella term for a variety of medical conditions. Now, these gentlemen certainly do not have Swyer syndrome. Swyer syndrome, they don't have ovaries or testes, and so they don't enter into puberty at all. And how they're treated is with estrogen and progesterone. So what happened with these guys is they certainly went through male puberty, as you can tell. But there are probably 3 or 4 other conditions that they could have. We don't know the exact one they do have. But sometimes, and this really is unrelated to the whole trans topic, so I don't like getting into it too much, but it's come up this week. So there are a variety of conditions, like persistent Müllerian duct syndrome, where in your early days of fetal development, we all start forming fallopian tubes and a uterus. Even the boys. And in males, a hormone is produced called anti-Müllerian hormone, which causes that structure to disintegrate, and then our male gonads form. But with these people, they have a defect where that hormone isn't released, and so these males will be born with a useless uterus and fallopian tubes, and their testes may be undescended, and their gonads and their penis didn't form properly. So at birth, they might appear to be female, but they're fully male, because what ultimately determines our sex isn't even chromosomes. It's the gametes that we're designed to produce. We produce sperm, males do. Women produce eggs. That's ultimately what determines our sex. And so these men have internalized testes probably in all likelihood, and they might have thought they were girls when they were first born, but then when puberty starts and they start releasing all this testosterone, that's when they discover, oh, this is actually a male. The same thing happened with Caster Semenya, this South African track athlete who was destroying all the women. So it's very unfortunate what happened to them. But they know now that they're male. They've known since puberty. And they had tests done by the International Boxing Association. 2 separate tests over 2 separate years. They are undoubtedly XY chromosomes, and they are male. They just have a disorder. But they have all the advantages of being male, and they shouldn't be fighting women. This is very simple.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You mentioned a number of studies, and I'm wondering, and statistics, and I'm wondering if you have a link for those.
So I need to make my website better, but if you go to my website and go to the studies page, you'll find the one study I mentioned is right there. It's mentioned, it's by Bradley, Singh, and Zucker. There's also a spreadsheet link you can click on, which takes you to 12 other academic studies, which shows how many of these kids grew up and out of this, how many grew up to be gay, and if you click on the link, it'll take you to the scientific page where those studies are posted.
And your website is at?
BillboardChris.com.
Billboard Chris. Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes.
Hi, Chris. Thank you very much. Jeff Delray, Chilliwack Hope. My question is a two-part, but it's short. Do you think the reason for all this rainbow alphabet nonsense is due to the vengeful, vindictive single parents who are suffering from PSD of a broken relationship, and that they have children who they can control through manipulative practices to enact this revenge?
Okay, so in a short word, no. But this is complicated. So this is coming from a whole lot of different directions. This is coming from school. This is coming from social media. It's in the culture. It's everywhere. This is pushed by TQ organizations. I like to separate the LGB from the TQ. Gay people have nothing to do with queer theory. Queer theory is a political movement. Transgenderism is a denial of reality. This is a political movement being pushed with tons of money behind it. And what happened really around 2010, 2015, all across the West, when gay rights were won, the new objective for these nonprofit organizations, these TQ organizations, it went from gay rights to trans rights. And they've been successful in taking what is a mental illness and turning it into a civil rights movement and silencing everybody. Because those 5 letters strike fear in the hearts of men, and nobody wants to say anything. It's like we're all in a daze. But we have to stop being in that daze, and we have to speak up. Because this isn't about bigotry, this is about child protection. And a lot of leftists agree with us as well. The moderate ones, the normal ones, not the radicals. That far 10%, the far left controls the entire left. Because no one among those moderates will speak up, because then they get canceled by their own party. And so you get the most radical people running for office, and they don't represent their constituents. But this is coming from social media and school mainly, but it's a social contagion primarily affecting girls. And I would encourage you to follow my friend Mia Hughes, who was here yesterday on X. She writes a lot about the social contagion aspect all throughout history. This is nothing new. Girls are particularly prone to this. Yes, sir.
Hello. Okay, the mic is working. Seeing as we're having to counter people who are, of course, very often very fragile and mentally ill people when we are dealing with this topic, how can we do so, or what would be your advice in how we would compassionately deal with, but firmly deal with these people?
So we really don't need to worry about them. Okay? I see people arguing with trans activists online. It's totally pointless. We don't need to change any of their minds. We need to reach the 80% in the middle. We need to reach the normies. That's my whole objective. I don't argue with those people. On the street, they can provide good content, you know? Those videos will go viral, and I can confuse them in that moment. I say things that they agree with, and I ask them questions, because you have to get them thinking. Nobody comes out of a cult because you told them they were wrong. Nobody comes out of a cult because you provide them with information. They only ever come out because they start questioning it themselves. So you can plant those seeds of doubt with them, but really we just need to reach the normies and educate them. Because most people just go to work, they come home, they have their barbecue, they watch TV, they play with the kids, and repeat. They're not involved in this, they don't get it. If you ask them what a trans woman is, some don't know. They don't know if that's a male or a female. So never use the terminology that the left uses. Always just use fact-based terms and simple terms. These aren't trans kids, these are boys and girls. These aren't trans boys, they're girls. These aren't trans women, they're just men. Or trans-identified males, if you must. But yeah, don't worry about the radicals, we just gotta reach the normies.
All right, thank you.
Hello, I'm Stephen Mack, candidate Simcoe North. I often
end up in debates about this topic. And I totally agree with you, there's no such thing as a trans child. But I find I encounter a logical problem that what magic thing happens at age 18 that suddenly it's okay to be trans? Like, I find my position is there's no such thing as trans adults either. And I have debates where the opponent points, look, there's a trans person there, don't they matter? And I'm very tempted to say, not really, or at least they should not be. They should not be a role model. Like, how do you handle, I sense this problem of adult versus child.
So, yes, I say all the time, transition, or body modification, because that's all it is. Transition is something you do, it's not something you are. This is an identity label, that's all it is. It's just a label, it means nothing. It's not an alternate state of being, it's not an alternate type of human, it's just a label. They're all male or female. So yes, truly, it doesn't exist. And I say there are 2 sexes and 0 genders. So if there's 0 genders, nobody's transgender. And you know what's funny? On the street, I'll be talking to these trans-identified individuals, and I'll tell them that, and they agree with me. I say, okay, so then what are you trans of, if there's no gender? Because the left took gender, which we used as a polite synonym for sex, and they've taken it and they've redefined it to mean something else entirely. And we have to get away from that. So I don't like using the word gender at all. I use the word sex, because gender has come to mean too many things to too many people. But there's 2 sexes and that's it. And so, yes, with 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, can they do what they want with their bodies? Yeah. Do doctors have to follow their directions? No. Doctors swore an oath to first do no harm. And if an 18-year-old girl with autism and sexual abuse comes into their practice, they shouldn't be sending her to the gender clinic to get her breasts cut off. They should be treating her holistically. They should be treating her mental health. And they're under no obligations to cut off the body parts of women or to give these people drugs and hormones.
So you would agree, basically, that no adult is born in the wrong body either?
No one's ever born in the wrong body.
Thank you.
There's no such thing. It's total nonsense.
Thank you, Chris. My name is Sylvia. Do you believe that food based on industrial farming that use supplement to feed animals or soy milk can cause confusion in kids' development?
I hear things like this a lot about nutrition or vaccines or fetal cells that are used in vaccines. This is a social contagion. This is a psychological thing.
Okay.
So people are easily indoctrinated and manipulated. And of course, kids are the most easily manipulated. And that's really what this is. You know, bulimia, for example, was never a big issue with women until it was named. It was put in the DSM and the media wrote about it. Now suddenly millions of girls saw this thing, oh, bulimia, and whoosh, it spread all across the world. There have been all sorts of social crazes that have gone on throughout history. This is just the latest one. And it's entirely psychological and social. You get entire friend groups of girls who show up to these gender clinics. That's impossible if this was some biological thing, or this was due to nutrition or whatever. It's because of their influence on their friends. I've talked with detransitioners, young women. A 22-year-old woman came out to the University of Washington with me. At 16, she was depressed. She developed really early in life. That's hard for girls. She was anxious. She didn't leave the house much. She was playing video games, and it's through 2 people she met playing video games that they taught her the reason you're so uncomfortable is because you were born wrong, and you're really a trans man. So at 16, she got her breasts cut off. She went on testosterone. She has a deep voice for life now. At 19, she had massive regrets. But none of that would have happened without these social influences. And we see entire clusters in schools. At the Langley Fine Arts School in British Columbia, where I'm from, 45 middle school girls say they're trans or non-binary. Because it's a fine arts school and the teachers are pushing this nonsense. That's it. So you've got to protect your kids from this stuff. You've got to tell your kids, if you hear the word gender at school, I want to hear about it. You've got to talk to your kids' teachers and ask them, what do you think about gender ideology? You'll find out right away. And if you get some 23-year-old blue-haired teacher who loves gender ideology, you got to get your kid out of that class. Honestly.
Thank you.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for everything you do. My name is Jeff Evely. I'm the candidate for Sydney Glace Bay in Nova Scotia, and I just got out of the military in 2021. I was posted to Ottawa for my last 7 years. My daughter became a victim of gender ideology while we were there, and she was stalked and groomed by the Children's Hospital of Leafspring, Ontario in Ottawa. And after, they target them directly and start sending them letters directly. And after I threw the letters in the garbage and avoided them for long enough, she basically forgot about it. And we hadn't heard from them a year and a half until they started calling her phone directly while I was deployed to Iraq in 2019. So I came back to make sure that I was at those appointments. And just like you say, and there is absolutely nothing to it, I provided them with all of the studies, and there's really no way to kind of break through their own ideological indoctrination. I happen to know that from experience. And just for your information, Pierre Poilievre knew exactly what he was voting for with Bill C-4 because, yeah, I spoke to him for half an hour on the phone before he ever voted. I was his constituent at the time, so he knew exactly what he was doing. And I guess I'm just curious to know if there are any lawyers in Canada you're aware of that are friendly to our cause that might be willing to take on some of these medical institutions.
So Lisa Bildy, who now runs her own practice, she used to work for the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedom. I've asked her that question, and she makes the point that you really need a whole law firm and tons of money to take on these institutions because you're taking on the government, and that's who you're suing. And they got endless resources, so we need someone to step up. We need a law firm to step up, and we probably need some rich people to get involved and fund them, because we do need to sue. But that's a long battle, and I don't think we have that long. What we need are some politicians standing up and doing the right thing, like Danielle Smith has started to do in Alberta, and what the premiers in Saskatchewan and New Brunswick have done, where they're starting to get this out of the schools. So we do need lawsuits, and I'm sure there will be lawsuits, but I'm not aware of any law firm willing to take this on right now. To be honest, it's a sad state of affairs. Hi.
Hi, Wendy Martin, candidate for Oxford. It's going to make it short and sweet because I know we're running out of time. So it's kind of like a statement. So in 2019, I did my own transgender talk about gender ideology. And there is a lot of hate out there for us that speak up. And I posted your picture on my Facebook page, and immediately, I get the trans community coming on, which is okay because I said, you know what, I'm just gonna, you can, create my page all you want. The one thing that I wanted to mention is when you were talking about Bill C-4, and I wanted to let everybody know that when it came on a unanimous vote in the House, all it would have taken was one person to stand up and say no. So it's important for candidates and for our members to understand when you go into debates in 2024, you need to hold them accountable at the Conservative Party. If they say, well, I couldn't say anything, they actually could, because all they had to do was say no. And your information that you give, Chris, is amazing. And I can't thank you enough for what you're doing. And just remember, one voice is one voice, but it ripples. It has a ripple effect, and this is what we're going to see, people. So stand up. Don't be afraid to take the hate. I love it. Like, give it to me, because that means I'm pushing the buttons, and it means we're making a difference. If we get silence, then you know what? We're not doing what we need to be doing. We need to rattle that cage. So again, thank you. And I don't know if you can respond because it was more of a statement than anything else, but I know they need to move on to the next, and I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. I love you. I gotta go. But if I can help you in any way, please email me, chris@billboardchris.com. You can find my email through my website, and I will do what I can. I'm busy, but I'll do whatever I can. And just say you're from the PPC, and I'll be sure to get back to you. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's have a standing ovation for Billboard Chris. Before you run away, Chris, we have a few small tokens of our appreciation. First and foremost, we have the lovely PPC mug, so thank you for that. The PPC socks, which are a big hit. You got to have a pair. I'm wearing mine right now. And our friends over at ppcmerch.ca has something for you as well.
That's right. So since our inception in 2018, 2024 for Revision, a commemorative watch for you there on behalf of the members here at Revision. Absolutely, definitely. And yeah, so it is the time for the PPC. That's right. Thank you.
Thanks again. Hey, if you really like this, you want to support Chris, I have one final ask of you. We want to get Chris the nomination to get the Order of Canada. I think if anybody deserves it, it's this man. We have sheets set up. If you go just through into our vendor suite, we have these papers available. Please make your way there now and sign this. Let's get Chris the Order of Canada and really show everybody what a true patriot looks like. That said, we're 20 minutes over. It is now time for lunch. Please feel free to make your way over to the dining hall. We have a lovely spread. We'll come back at around 2 o'clock for door-to-door campaigning. And if you haven't visited the vendors area, please do so as well. They will be closing down shortly, so this is one of your last chances to visit the vendor section. Thanks again for being here. This is Revision 2024.